Chapter 33. During lunch in the afternoon, Qin Shi and Aunt Zhang talked about Nian Yan's kindergarten in detail. He really didn't understand why other children didn't like to go to kindergarten, but his child was clamoring to go to kindergarten all day long. In order to respect the little girl's decision and to let Aunt Zhang go home without worry, Qin Shi went out after dinner and prepared to inspect the nearby kindergartens. There was only one public kindergarten near Kangju community. Although Nian Yan was a local, Aunt Zhang didn't want to send her there before, so she missed the registration time. In addition, there were very few places for public kindergartens. Even if Nian Yan signed up, she probably wouldn't get a place in the end. Therefore, Qin Shi now had only one choice left, and that was to send Nian Yan to a private kindergarten. Private kindergartens were not as expensive as public kindergartens. Not only were the tuition fees expensive, but there were also often news of teachers abusing children. At the thought of this, Qin Shi felt a little uncomfortable. He really didn't dare to imagine what he would do if Nian Yan was abused in kindergarten. At the thought of abuse, he couldn't help but think of several Korean movies he had watched, such as Suwon, Don't Cry, The Furnace, and so on. He couldn't get over it after watching it. Thinking of Suwon's cute and sensible appearance, he felt that Nian Yan would be as beautiful and cute as Suwon when she was 2 years old. Qin Shi's thoughts drifted further and further away, but when he thought of some scenes in the movie, he suddenly became a little angry and couldn't help but burst out cursing. Damn it! I almost forgot. I must prepare some protective measures for Nian Yan when I go back later. Perhaps this was the mood of every father. This was especially true for the girl's father. They would always involuntarily let their imaginations run wild, imagining all kinds of possible scenarios. Daughters were their father's little angels, the cutest existence in the world. Qin Shi would never allow anyone to hurt Nian Yan. Absolutely not. Times were always improving. Qin Shi remembered that he didn't attend kindergarten when he was young. He spent his days in the mountains with his friends using wooden sticks wrapped in spider webs to catch cicadas and crickets. Sometimes he would bathe in the river and steal corn and potatoes from the neighbor's house to roast. At that time, people were very rough. They were not as particular as they were now. Even kindergartens had started to teach bilingual. Some wealthy families had even begun to consider whether to choose the IB or AP courses at this time. Their children had not even said whether they wanted to go abroad, but their parents had already stipulated that they had to study abroad when they grew up. Recently, the country had also opened up the two-child policy, which had led to the kindergarten market becoming a sea of blue. Countless educational institutions had sprung up like bamboo shoots after a spring rain, from low-end kindergartens in small communities to famous overseas schools with hundreds of years of history. There were all kinds of choices. He found an internet cafe and checked online for a while. Finally, he chose a private kindergarten that was not too far away from Kangju district. The overall condition of this kindergarten was not bad, and its reputation was also good. The miscellaneous expenses added up to about 3,000 yuan a month. There were two main reasons why Qin Shi did not consider the aristocratic kindergarten that cost 200,000 yuan a year. First, the registration time was missed. Such aristocratic kindergartens generally had to be registered a year in advance before they could enter the waiting list. After they were in line, they had to go through an interview before they could study. The whole process was very troublesome. Second, Qin Shi estimated that Nian Yan would not be willing to stay in the kindergarten for too long. After a few days of careful research, he found that he suspected that Nian Yan was very interested in the world of other children because Aunt Zhang had not taken her out to play since she was a child. Therefore, Qin Shi planned to let Nian Yan try it first. If the little girl liked it, he would let her study in the best one through his connections. If she didn't like it, he would bring her back. Anyway, Qin Shi did not have any hobbies. Now, taking care of his daughter had become his biggest hobby. After choosing the school, Qin Shi went back and told the little girl. She immediately clapped her hands happily. I want to go to kindergarten, I want to go to kindergarten. Perhaps because she was too excited, the little girl made a fuss until 10:30 tonight. Then, under the double coercion of Qin Shi and Aunt Zhang, she had to lie on the bed obediently. Early the next morning, Aunt Zhang changed the little girl into a new white dress. The little girl put on the new clothes and tied 2 ponytails. For the first time, she did not want Qin-shi to carry her. Instead, she ran out of the door by herself. The kindergarten was not far away. It only took about 10 minutes to walk from Kongju District. After explaining the situation to the security guard, Qin-shi carried Nian directly to the principal's office. After the principal knew that Nian was going to be a transfer student, he immediately became very enthusiastic. However, the implication was that Qin-shi had to pay an additional school building fee. Qin-shi also had a general understanding of these things in private kindergartens, so he did not talk nonsense with him. He directly swiped his card and paid a series of fees for this semester's management fee, school building fee, food fee, and a series of other expenses. After the card was swiped, nearly 20,000 yuan was gone. This kind of kindergarten was not so particular. As soon as Qin-shi paid the fees, the principal immediately called a woman in her 30s. She looked quite kind. The woman's surname was Wang. In the future, she would be Nian's class teacher. Teacher Wang took the father and daughter to the outside of the classroom. However, when Nian saw more than 20 children about her age sitting inside, she suddenly felt a little timid. She was obviously very excited just now, but now, like a frosted eggplant, she shrank into Qin-shi's arms. "Papa, I don't want to come to kindergarten." Seeing this, Qin-shi suddenly did not know whether to laugh or cry. Silly children were still afraid of strangers. However, at this time, even if Qin-shi doted on the little fellow, at this moment he could no longer do as she wished. People had to go through this process. Since the child was here, she should go in. He must not let her develop the habit of backing out. "Nian, be good. You see so many children inside. If you go in with Teacher Wang, everyone will play with you." "No, I'm scared." The little fellow's mouth twitched. It seemed that she was about to cry. Qin-shi had no choice but to look at Teacher Wang. Teacher Wang had seen this kind of situation for a long time. The children in this class would cry for most of the day when they came every day. In fact, Nian's situation was considered good. "Nian, be good. Come, I will take you in. Don't be afraid. You will all be friends in the future." Teacher Wang motioned to Qin-shi to give Nian to her. Qin-shi wanted to hand Nian over, but the little fellow held his neck tightly and cried loudly, "Papa, don't go, Papa, don't go. Nian, don't be afraid. Papa won't go. He will wait for you outside. Go in and play with the other children, okay?" Teacher Wang wanted to take the little fellow, but the little fellow hung on Qin-shi and refused to come down no matter what she said. She buried her head in Qin-shi's shoulder and didn't say anything. She just cried. Seeing this, Teacher Wang motioned to Qin-shi to comfort her, so Qin-shi quickly said, "Papa won't go. I will wait for you at the door. Nian, you have to listen to me and learn to respect me, okay? Nian, don't cry. You won't look good if you cry too much. Look, the other children are laughing at you. Don't worry, Papa won't go. Papa will wait for you here. When you finish school, Papa will take you home for dinner. If you cry again, Papa will go back and tell Grandma that Nian went to kindergarten to cry today and was laughed at by the other children. Nian, good girl, don't cry, don't cry." After coaxing for a long time, the little fellow reluctantly got down from her father's shoulder. Seeing this, Teacher Wang decisively coaxed and pulled the little fellow into the classroom. After Nian went in, Qin-shi didn't leave. Instead, he stood in the corridor and quietly looked at the little fellow in the room. The little fellow sat alone on the small bench. Her movements were a little stiff, but the children next to her were quite friendly to her. After seeing a new student, they surrounded the new student to comfort her under the teacher's instructions. The little fellow adapted for a while. After several times she looked back and saw that Qin-shi was still at the door, she finally felt relieved and slowly played with the other children. Qin-shi stood outside the door for a long time. Finally, a teacher couldn't help but remind him that parents shouldn't stay in the park. After that, Qin-shi had to walk out of the kindergarten. In fact, not to mention the little fellow, even he, as a father, was reluctant to leave. Although it was just to send the child to kindergarten and go home at night. But Qin-shi always felt empty in her heart, That kind of feeling was really strange. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Thank you to Universe Handsome King. Farewell to the sea and night. What is Dao 1? Looking to tomorrow, and Li Shujin for their tips. Chapter 34. Zhao Yuan was discharged from the hospital. With 8 broken ribs, it would probably take more than half a year for him to recover. However, he was lucky that the broken ribs did not penetrate his internal organs. Otherwise, he would have died on the spot. In short, he was lucky to have kept his life. The doctor performed thoracic fixation on him, and he could be discharged from the hospital to recuperate at home. It would take more than half a year for his bones to regrow, so the doctor advised him not to do any strenuous exercise during this time. After returning home, Zhao Yuan tried out the new wheelchair his mother bought for him. Although his leg was not injured and there would not be any major problems with his daily activities, his mother was very worried. She was afraid that her son would move around and affect the internal fixation in his body, so she simply bought him a wheelchair. When he heard that it was his father who asked his mother not to pursue the matter, Zhao Yuan did not have much of a reaction on his face. His mother looked at him worriedly, then said with a frown, "Yuan heir, what is the background of the guy who injured you?" Background? Zhao Yuan sneered. His expression seemed calm, but there was an imperceptible glint in his eyes. No background, just a piece of trash who was abandoned by his wife. Now he stays at home all day to take care of the child. Speaking of this, Zhao Yuan couldn't help but touch his chest. Then he chuckled and said, "But from this kick, I'm afraid I really underestimated him." No background? That shouldn't be. Why would President Ning of Zhonghai Ocean Group vouch for him? Hearing this, Zhao Yuan shook his head and said with some confusion, "I'm not sure, but I'll send someone to investigate." "Yuan heir, we can't just let this go." "I know." The woman wanted to say something, but Zhao Yuan waved his hand at her and said, "Mom, you don't have to worry about this. I have my own arrangements." Zhao Yuan gave Li Xiuwen a call and asked to meet him. It was Li Xiuwen who sent Zhao Yuan to the hospital that day, so Li Xiuwen was very clear about Zhao Yuan's situation. News always spread quickly in the circle, so Li Xiuwen roughly knew that the police did not come to arrest Zhao Yuan because the Zhao family did not want to pursue the matter of Zhao Yuan's injury. Now that he suddenly received a call from Zhao Yuan, Li Xiuwen's first reaction was, Zhao Yuan was ready to retaliate. Although he didn't want to get involved, no matter what, he and Zhao Yuan were friends. Plus, Zhao Yuan was a few years younger than him, so Li Xiuwen couldn't refuse. Zhao Yuan chose a very high-end private club as the location. As soon as Li Xiuwen entered, he saw Zhao Yuan sitting in a wheelchair and was shocked. He quickly went up and asked, "Young Master Yuan, are you okay? Brother Li is here? Come, take a seat." After asking Li Xiuwen to sit down, Zhao Yuan smiled and said, 8 of his ribs are broken and fixed internally. His leg is fine. It's just that when he swings his arm while walking, it might affect his wound. He'll be fine in 2 days. That's good. Li Xiuwen laughed dryly and did not reply. Zhao Yuan glanced at him and didn't care. He continued, "Brother Li, you know that I have a bad temper and do things impulsively. It's really hard for me to take it lying down after being beaten up like that." Hearing that, Li Xiuwen nodded and said objectively, "It's just a verbal argument. That Chen Shigai actually hit you so hard. It's really a bit too much." "A bit too much?" Zhao Yuan shook his head and suddenly changed. He said each word clearly and sternly, "Brother Li, do you know? He almost took my life." Li Xiuwen was stunned and still didn't say anything. Since it involved the safety of their lives, this was a huge grudge. However, because it had nothing to do with him, Li Xiuwen couldn't express any opinions. The room quieted down. Zhao Yuan took a sip of tea, then asked casually, "I heard that you've been chasing Lin Xian for a long time, Brother Li?" Hearing that, Li Xiuwen's expression changed. Was this Zhao Yuan crazy? Who in Zhonghai didn't know that Lin Xian was the woman he had his eyes on? She was already his exclusive property. Could it be that he still wanted to go against him? Therefore, Li Xiuwen stared at Zhao Yuan and emphasized with some displeasure, Lin Xian is the woman I have my eyes on. I know, of course I know. Zhao Yuan laughed loudly and gestured for Li Xiaowen not to worry. He then continued, I know that you've been chasing her for a few years and haven't gotten her. So, as your brother, I want to help you. What do you want to do? Li Xiaowen asked with a frown. Zhao Yuan smiled and pointed upstairs. He said, I've reserved a room for you upstairs. Miss Lin Xian will come over later, F***CK. Li Xiaowen stood up from the sofa in anger. He then pointed at Zhao Yuan and shouted, I'm warning you, don't do anything rash. If you dare to touch Lin Xian, I won't let you go. Hearing that, Zhao Yuan couldn't help but be stunned. Did young Master Li really have feelings for her? Young Master Li of the One Mao group was a bed that countless women would line up to get on. Zhao Yuan thought that Li Xiaowen just wanted to play a game of cat and mouse with Lin Xian. That was why he was hesitant for so long. He didn't expect Li Xiaowen to really have feelings for her. It wasn't that Zhao Yuan was bragging. How many men in their circle really took feelings seriously? He didn't expect Lin Xian to be so important in Li Xiaowen's heart. He made a mistake. Seeing that Li Xiaowen was furious, Zhao Yuan immediately put on a smiling face and said with a chuckle, Just kidding, just kidding. Since Brother Li has already said so, why would I have any ideas about Lin Xian? I can't offend you for a woman, right? It's good that you know. Li Xiaowen snorted and then stopped being polite. He said, I still have things to do at the company. Take your time, young Master Li. After that, Li Xiaowen flicked his sleeves and left. After Li Xiaowen left, Zhao Yuan sat quietly in his wheelchair and seemed to be thinking about something. After a while, he picked up the phone next to him. He dialed a number and then ordered the person on the other end of the phone, do it. When Zhao Yuan put down the phone, his gaze had already drifted to the female receptionist in a cheongsam at the door. You, come here for a moment. The woman in the cheongsam heard Zhao Yuan's voice and quickly ran to his side. She bowed slightly and asked, Mr. Zhao, do you have any orders? Zhao Yuan looked at her beautiful face and then at her curvy figure, then nodded in satisfaction. Then, under the woman's confused gaze, he suddenly pointed at his crotch. The woman in the cheongsam was stunned for a moment and immediately understood what Zhao Yuan meant. She quickly responded with a smile, Mr. Zhao, there is a professional technician upstairs who can serve you, it's you. I'm sorry, 100,000. There was a rustling sound in the room. Zhao Yuan looked at the woman in the cheongsam who was kneeling in front of him with satisfaction. Suddenly, he hugged her head with both hands and then pressed it down hard. The woman let out a whimper and struggled to raise her head, but Zhao Yuan didn't care at all. He muttered to himself with a ferocious expression, Are you that good at martial arts? Come, I'll slowly play with you. Asterisk 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 asterisk. Chapter 35. At 3:30 in the afternoon. There was still half an hour before school was over, but the surroundings were already crowded with people. There was no need to guess that these were all parents who came to pick up their children. Chen Shi was a young man in his 20s. Standing in the middle of a group of uncles and aunties, he looked like a crane in a flock of chicken. The children were playing games on the playground of the kindergarten. Chen Shi looked at the little fellow across the wall and found that she was playing happily on the slide and didn't notice him standing outside the wall. It seemed that she was so happy that she forgot to look for Papa, which made Chen Shi feel a lot more at ease. He was really afraid that Nian Nian would not be able to adapt to the environment of the kindergarten. He couldn't let the child suffer from strange diseases such as autism and depression, because these were related to mental health and other diseases. He really couldn't deal with them. Chen Shi stood outside the wall and looked at Nian Nian. At this time, an aunt suddenly reached out and patted him. Hey, young man, are you the child of Sister Zhang's family? Chen Shi looked back and saw a big sister standing behind him with a smile on her face. It was the fat aunt he met when he just entered the community on the first day he came back. Yes, I live in Block 5, Unit 1, Room 302. Auntie, who are you? Hey, I always feel that you are a little familiar. I seem to have seen you several times in the community. Just now, I suddenly saw Nian Nian inside, so I thought, could Nian Nian be your child? My surname is Chen, you can call me Auntie Chen. My grandson is also inside. Look, it's that troublemaker. As the fat aunt spoke, she smiled and pointed to the boy running like the wind on the playground. Looking at her posture, it seemed that she had completely forgotten that she had once regarded Chen Shi as a lunatic beggar. Hello, Auntie Chen, I'm working outside and just came home for a while, so I can't even recognize all the neighbors next door. It's okay, you'll know them after a while. Auntie Chen waved her hand and said with a smile, let me tell you, your Nian Nian is the most obedient child in our community. The little girl is so cute. Our Peng Peng likes to play with her the most. Really? Chen Shi smiled politely. Perhaps it was because he was not used to dealing with uncles and aunties, so he did not know what to say now. He could only laugh and listen to Auntie Chen's nagging. That's a must. Last time, I teased that silly boy of mine, saying that when he grows up, I'll marry Nian Nian to him. Sigh, you didn't see it. At that time, that silly kid's face was as red as a monkey's butt. He was so embarrassed that he could die. Really? Of course. You don't say. The 4 or 5-year-old children these days are much smarter than we were back then. They're only a little older, and they can already tell who's good-looking and who's not. Many children in the neighborhood like to play with Nian Nian. However, Big Sister Zhang was the only one who took care of the children in the past, so she didn't have much time to take Nian Nian out to play. Since you're back, you should bring Nian Nian out more often in the future. Hearing this, Chen Shi still nodded with a smile on his face, but he suddenly had some vigilance in his heart. Martinson believed that children around the age of 3 would have the consciousness and behavior of love towards the opposite sex. Children have a strong thirst for knowledge, and they are very concerned about everything, including the human organs. Sometimes it's a person, sometimes it's between partners of the opposite sex, or they let each other see the X organ, or touch it with their hands. The forms of expression are mostly games such as imitating the doctor, lifting the skirt, fake marriage, playing house, and so on. According to a survey of 290 children by the Nagoya Youth Association in 1970, 201 of them did the action of lifting the skirt, and 70% of the children stopped lifting the skirt under the eyes of adults. 167 peeked into the toilet, 164 peeked from under the skirt, and 108 played with the X organ. It can be seen that this is a common behavior among children, and it's impossible to effectively avoid it. Thinking of this, Chen Shi faintly felt a little uncomfortable. Dare to have ideas about my daughter? No, I have to find an opportunity to popularize Nian Nian with the knowledge of sex education, human sexual psychology, its development and the formation of gender roles have a certain law. Generally, if it is allowed to develop naturally, the result is often normal, but if some incorrect education methods are imposed on the child, it is very likely to lead to a deformed result. Especially for children between 3 and 5 years old, through sex education, the child's sex should be recognized by society and individuals in the sense of sociology of sex and psychology. If the child is found to have an incorrect performance in sex, it should be calmly and patiently corrected and naturally guided, and should not be scolded or intimidated. For example, seeing a child playing with the X organ, some mothers will angrily stop them. Don't move. Dirty. Don't touch this place. It's so embarrassing. Don't touch it in the future. Or forcibly pull it away, or even give a beating. In fact, this can easily affect the child from childhood to form a misconception. X organ is dirty, can't be seen, and can't be touched. Therefore, all activities related to X must be suppressed, or else they will be punished. Children are in this relatively closed or conservative environment for a long time, and their sexual needs will be visibly or invisibly suppressed. If it is serious, it will even lead to physical and mental disorders or diseases. Therefore, to let nature take its course and guide correctly is the only effective and correct way. Perhaps it was because of the mischievous traditional ideas. After chatting with Aunt Chen, Chen Shi's mood was very complicated. After all, Nian Nian was a girl, so as a father, he always felt that his daughter was at a disadvantage. Although Chen Shi also understood that it was a child's mischief, and it was more of their nature and instinct as human beings, he still felt a little unhappy, very unhappy, Very unhappy, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the kindergarten was over. Chen Shi squeezed to the school gate, and the little girl saw Chen Shi in the crowd at a glance. She shouted "Papa," and wanted to get out of the iron gate, but she was stopped by Teacher Wang in time. The children in the kindergarten were not picked up by just anyone. When Teacher Wang saw Chen Shi, she held Nian hand and led the little girl out of the school gate. "Papa!" As soon as the little girl stepped through the iron gate, she threw herself on Chen Shi's lap, and then hugged Chen Shi's thigh, raised her little head and said sweetly, "Papa, I miss you so much." "Good girl, moi." Chen Shi laughed and picked up the little girl, then held her and said to Teacher Wang, "Say goodbye to your teacher." "Goodbye, teacher." The little girl waved her little hand hard, and it seemed that she had a good impression of Teacher Wang. Teacher Wang and Chen Shi said a few polite words, and then praised the little girl for being very sensible, and then she was busy sending another child off. Chen Shi walked on the road with Nian in his arms, and the little girl excitedly told him what she had experienced today. "Nian, do you like kindergarten?" "Yes." Hearing this, the little girl immediately nodded heavily. She had always played alone, so she was naturally happy to suddenly have so many friends of the same age. "Then Papa will bring you tomorrow, okay?" "Okay." "Good girl." Chen Shi touched her little face, wondering in her heart when the little girl would say that she didn't want to go to kindergarten. Chapter 36. The next day. Chen Shi thought that the little fellow's enthusiasm for kindergarten would decline a little. But he didn't expect that just after they had breakfast, and Chen Shi didn't even have time to clean up the dishes, the little fellow had already shouted that she wanted to go to class. Then she pulled Chen Shi out. "Papa, let's go. I'm going to class. The teacher said that I can't be late for class. If I'm late, I'm not a good child." Seeing this, Aunt Zhang hurriedly asked Chen Shi to put the dishes there and said with a smile, "The little thing likes kindergarten so much. You can take her there. I'll clean it up later." Maybe because she was used to going out during the day and coming home at night, the little fellow was not so clingy to Aunt Zhang now. Seeing Chen Shi wipe his hands and come to the door to change shoes, the little fellow couldn't wait to open the door and then ran outside, waving to Aunt Zhang and shouting, "Goodbye, Grandma." "Good girl, go. You have to listen to the teacher at school, okay?" "I know." The little fellow opened her mouth and was so happy that flowers bloomed on her face. After going out, Chen Shi wondered what happened to the little fellow today. It seemed that she was more excited than yesterday, so he asked, "Nian, is kindergarten fun? Why are you so happy?" Hearing this, the little fellow immediately raised her little face and said happily, "The teacher said that she would teach us to draw today." "Oh, you know how to draw?" "I can't draw." The little fellow shook her head and then continued happily, "But after the teacher taught me, I can draw." "Then when you learn to draw, you can come back and draw for Papa?" "Yes. I want to draw Papa, Grandma, and Mama." The little fellow nodded heavily and then held Chen Shi's head. Her voice was like glutinous rice, sticky and sweet as she said with a smile, "The teacher said that the first place can get a little red flower. I want a little red flower." "Then Nian, you have to work hard and try to get a little red flower. Then Papa will paste it on the wall for you." "Okay." The father and daughter chatted as they walked. After a while, they arrived at the kindergarten. The entrance of the kindergarten was already full of parents, as well as, there were countless crying children. There was a little boy who didn't want to go in, so he stayed on the ground and tugged at his mother's trousers. No matter how his mother tried to persuade him, he wouldn't listen and kept saying that he didn't want to go to kindergarten. His mother was so angry that she wanted to hit him. When Chen Shi saw that, he took advantage of the fact that the little fellow was still excited and hurriedly said to her, "Nian, look, isn't that brother embarrassed?" Crying shame, shame, shame. As the little girl spoke, she used her small hand to scratch her face, making a look of disdain. "Then in the future, when Daddy sends you to kindergarten, you can't be like him." "I won't cry." The little guy proudly turned his little head away, as if he had completely forgotten how pitiful he had been the day before. Teacher Wang and 2 other teachers were standing at the school gate to welcome the children in their class. Chen Shi put Nian down and motioned for her to hurry over. But at this time, the little fellow stood on the ground and tugged at Chen Shi's hand, then pointed to her little face. Seeing this, Chen Shi immediately squatted down with a big laugh, then gave the little fellow a big kiss on the face. Only then did she jump and run to the iron gate. "Goodbye, Daddy. Go, listen to the teacher. Daddy will wait for you here after school." After the little fellow went in, Chen Shi went to the outside of the wall, ready to watch them finish their morning exercises before going back. However, after a while, his phone suddenly rang. Chen Shi took out his phone and looked. It was Lin Xian calling. Chen Shi picked up the phone, but there was no sound from the other end. "Lin Xian?" Chen Shi shouted a few times, but there was no response. Just when he thought that Lin Xian had accidentally dialed the wrong number, he suddenly heard a man's deep voice on the other end of the phone. "Chen Shi?" Chen Shi was stunned for a moment, then quickly asked, "Hello, who are you? Why are you calling me with Lin Xian's phone?" Hearing this, the person on the other end of the phone laughed and said with a bit of banter, "You forgot my voice so quickly?" Chen Shi was stunned for a moment. After he came back to his senses, his face instantly turned ugly. So, he asked coldly, "Zhao Yuan?" "Pa, it's me. Actually, I'm just calling to let you know that I'm safe. Where is Lin Xian?" Chen Shi stood on the sidewalk outside the kindergarten wall with the phone in his hand. His voice seemed to come from the 9 serenities, cold and harsh. "Lin Xian? Oh, she's here. I borrowed her phone to call you. I'll give it back to her later. Zhao Yuan, I'm warning you. If you dare to touch a hair on Lin Xian's head, I'll let you know what it means to be skinned alive." As soon as he finished speaking, a green brick under Chen Shi's feet suddenly shattered with a kacha sound. Zhao Yuan on the other end of the phone laughed and said, "I'll let her talk to you." Chen Shi turned up the volume to the maximum, but after listening for a while, he could only hear a rustling sound. He couldn't hear anything at all from the other end of the phone. Slap. Suddenly, the sound of a slap was heard. Then, Zhao Yuan's gloomy voice came from the other end of the phone. "Speak, speak to him." However, after his voice fell, there was still no sound from the other end of the phone, as if Zhao Yuan was talking to the air. Chen Shi waited for a while, but still didn't hear anything. But right after that, the sound of a slap came from the other end of the phone. "I'm King asking you to speak." The more Chen Shi listened, the more he felt that something was wrong. He quickly shouted on the phone, "Lin Xian? Lin Xian, are you okay?" On the other end of the phone, Lin Xian sat on the sofa, while Zhao Yuan held the phone to her mouth, constantly asking her to speak. However, Lin Xian kept her mouth tightly closed. No matter how Zhao Yuan hit her, she didn't make a sound. *CK. Zhao Yuan was enraged. He grabbed her hair and pulled it up with all his strength, as if he wanted to lift her up by pulling her hair. Lin Xian's hands were tied behind her back, so she couldn't struggle. She could only groan in pain. Maybe because her voice was heard by Chen Shi, Lin Xian didn't force it. She opened her mouth and quickly shouted, "Chen Shi, don't listen to him, don't come to me. Call the police." You still want to play tricks? Zhao Yuan spat fiercely, then gave him another slap. After that, Zhao Yuan picked up the phone and said with a gloomy face, "Chen Shi, I advise you not to call the police, or you should know what will happen next. Asterisk 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 asterisk." Chapter 37. In the Economic Development Zone on the outskirts of Zhonghai. This was a rather famous unfinished building in the Economic Development Zone. The main body of the building had been repaired, but there was no time to build the outer wall. It was said that the owner of this building was from Hong Kong. He had originally planned to invest in building an electronic equipment processing factory here, but for some unknown reason, the factory was not built. The office building was only half finished when the Hong Kong owner had already run away. Because it had been desolate for too long, the factory walls had long been overgrown with weeds. The main body of the building had also become somewhat dilapidated due to the wind and sun over the years. It had to be said that Zhao Yuan had chosen a good place. Because of this rundown place, no one would come here except for models and internet celebrities who filmed outdoor blockbusters. It was really the best place to kill someone and dispose of a corpse. Zhao Yuan searched for a few days and did not find any news about Qin Shi, so he simply made up his mind and kidnapped Lin Xian, who had the closest relationship with Qin Shi. Zhao Yuan pondered that since he had already done it, he might as well go all the way and go all the way. That was why he had tested Li Xiuwen and wanted to use Lin Xian to do him a favor and try to drag Li Xiuwen down with him. However, what Zhao Yuan did not expect was that Lin Xian actually had some weight in Li Xiuwen's heart. He did not even want to eat the meat in his mouth and insisted on imitating someone else's pure love. While Zhao Yuan despised him in his heart, he silently adjusted his plan. Since Li Xiuwen was unwilling to participate, then he could not blame him for ruthlessly destroying the flower. If there was someone to blame, then blame Lin Xian for having such a bad friend like Qin Shi. Although Li Xiuwen had sternly warned Zhao Yuan not to touch Lin Xian. However, Zhao Yuan was not afraid of Li Xiuwen. Besides, as long as it was done neatly, who would know what had happened in this remote, unfinished building? Young Master Yuan, this woman is really tasty. I, Hu Laosen, have lived for so many years, but I have never played with such a high-quality product. I really want to try it. A man in his 30s or 40s stood behind Zhao Yuan and kept looking back at Lin Xian, who was tied to the chair. Lin Xian was not in a good state at the moment. His hair was messy and his face was bruised. It was obvious that he had suffered a lot. Her mouth was taped shut, and her hands and feet were tied tightly, so she could only sit on the chair and whimper and struggle. Lin Xian had already been captured by these people for 2 days. When she left for work yesterday morning, she was drugged and taken away by these people as soon as she arrived at the parking lot. When she woke up, she found that she had been taken to this strange place, and the mastermind behind her kidnapping was Zhao Yuan. Zhao Yuan had no enmity with her, so there was only one reason why he had kidnapped her here. After waking up, Lin Xian immediately thought of Qin Shi. She was originally very scared, but when she confirmed that Zhao Yuan had not captured Qin Shi, her heart suddenly relaxed. Lin Xian did not know what was wrong with her. She was clearly a clay bodhisattva crossing the river, but in this situation, she was actually concerned about the safety of others. The group of people in front of her didn't seem to be good people. The one in the lead was called Old Third Hu, and he'd been constantly touching her. If it wasn't for Zhao Yuan stopping his actions in time, Lin Xian really didn't dare imagine what would have happened next. Hu Lao-san, you can deal with her if you want, but you have to take care of business first. I have a habit. When I'm doing something serious, I have to do it wholeheartedly. Do you understand what I mean? I understand. Young Master Yuan, you're right. The fierce-looking Hu Laosen squeezed out a very twisted smile and nodded in agreement. Zhao Yuan's spending this time was not small. 10 million yuan, including Hu Laosan and 6 other outlaws, to buy Qin Shi's life. Seeing that Hu Laosan was sensible, Zhao Yuan nodded with satisfaction. Then he sat on the sofa they temporarily got and closed his eyes to rest. Hu Laosan scratched his head and asked with some doubts, Young Master Yuan, are you so sure that the kid will come alone? He won't call the police, right? Don't worry. With my understanding of him, he will not ignore the safety of this woman. Speaking of this, Zhao Yuan paused, sneered, and continued, I have already arranged in the Municipal Public Security Bureau. If he calls the police, we have enough time to evacuate. Don't worry. Hu Laosen thought about it and still said with some worry, what if the kid doesn't come? Hearing this, Zhao Yuan could not help but laugh. He was laughing, but his eyes were cold, as well as bone-deep hatred. He will come. Zhao Yuan suddenly thought of something and added, by the way, you have to be careful when he comes. That kid is a martial artist. You have to remember to be careful. Don't fall into the gutter. A martial artist? Hu Laosen pursed his lips and asked fiercely, can you beat a gun? He broke 8 of my ribs with one kick. What do you think? Zhao Yuan touched his chest and looked at Hu Laosan with interest. So powerful. Hu Laosan was obviously shocked by his words. His face was full of disbelief. Qin Shi took a taxi, but he did not take the taxi directly to the unfinished building. Instead, he got off at the entrance of a factory on the street and walked over. Just as he walked through the entrance of the unfinished building, Qin Shi saw a young man hiding behind the wall on the 2nd floor and looking around. Looking at his sneaky appearance, he was probably sent by Zhao Yuan to keep watch. Chen Shi ignored him and walked directly into the unfinished building. After seeing Chen Shi enter the building, the young man was stunned for a moment and immediately rushed to the third floor. "Young Master Yuan, that kid is here." "Because he ran too fast," the young man said while panting. This kind of hooligan was addicted to prostitution, gambling, and drugs. He lived like a parasite. He could intimidate and do odd jobs, but if he really fought, he would tire himself out before he could even swing a few fists. His mission today was to act as a lookout, but just as he ran to the third floor and shouted, Chen Shi's figure had already appeared behind him. So fast? The young man looked at Chen Shi in surprise, but Chen Shi ignored him and walked directly in the direction of Zhao Yuan. Light footsteps sounded in the unfinished building, which was leaking air everywhere. When she saw Chen Shi appear, Lin Xian immediately became agitated. She shook her head frantically and her eyes were full of despair. She sobbed and wanted to ask Chen Shi to leave quickly, but her mouth was firmly sealed with tape. She could only twist her body frantically. Chen Shi saw the pain and despair in her eyes, and then looked at her disheveled appearance, and her heart couldn't help but clench fiercely. "Sorry I'm late." Chapter 38. On the empty floor, there were countless pieces of concrete scattered everywhere, as well as broken bricks and steel bars that had no place to pile up. Although it was noon, the unfinished building was still a little gloomy. From time to time, a cold wind would blow, giving people goosebumps. Chen Shi's footsteps sounded softly on the floor. Although he was more than 20 meters away, he could still clearly hear Lin Xian sobbing. Lin Xian struggled with all her might, but she could only let out a series of woo-woo sounds in an attempt to chase away the figure that was walking towards her. Unfortunately, the tape was firmly stuck to her mouth, making it impossible for her to say anything. She wanted to say something but couldn't. Lin Xian was so anxious that tears fell from her eyes. Chen Shi actually came alone. He didn't call the police. Lin Xian was about to lose all hope. She originally thought that this would only happen in movies, but it actually happened to her in real life. The male lead didn't call the police. Instead, he barged into the enemy's lair alone. This kind of stupid behavior was not so much the male lead's personal heroism, but the director's excessive fantasy. If the police couldn't solve the problem, what was the use of Chen Shi coming here? The heroism of heroic sacrifice under the romantic mood? If Lin Xian could open her mouth to speak, she probably would have already scolded Chen Shi. Zhao Yuan also seemed a little surprised. Chen Shi really dared to come here alone? He signaled with his eyes, and a few of his subordinates spread out, observing the surrounding movements from the top of the building. After observing for a while and confirming that there was nothing strange in the surroundings, they surrounded him without any scruples. Chen Shi stopped not far in front of Zhao Yuan. Zhao Yuan looked at him for a while, then suddenly laughed. After laughing for a while, Zhao Yuan said in a sinister voice, "I really didn't expect you to be a martial artist." "There are too many things you didn't expect." Chen Shi glanced at Zhao Yuan contemptuously and said lightly, "Actually, you should be glad, because ignorance gives you great courage." "Ignorance gives me courage?" Zhao Yuan was stunned for a moment. Then, as if he had heard a joke, he laughed wildly. While Zhao Yuan was laughing, Hu Laosen, who was standing next to him, suddenly winked at the young man behind Chen Shi. This young man who was sent as a sentry was not good at killing or arson, but he was good at stealing. Because he was very quick-witted, he instantly understood what Hu Laosen meant. Therefore, the young man secretly took out a folding knife and, while Chen Shi and Zhao Yuan were talking, quietly crept over. Don't be fooled by Old Third, whose ferocious appearance, which always made people mistakenly think that his brain was full of muscles, but in fact, Old Third who was very shrewd. Strategically, they despised the enemy, but tactically, they valued the enemy. Even a lion would use all its strength to hunt a rabbit. What's more, they were in a business that involved licking blood from the tip of the blade. If they were not careful and cautious in their work, they would have long since capsized in some gutter. If this brat who dared to come alone wasn't really stupid, then he definitely had something to rely on. Hu Laosen had also dealt with some martial artists before, so he knew that these martial artists were not easy to deal with. While calmly looking at the young man behind Chen Shi, he quietly put his right hand on his waist. Lin Xian was sitting at the back of the crowd. She had already seen Hu Lao-san and the others' waists bulge a little. It was a gun. She crazily shook her chair, shook her head and made a series of whimpering sounds. She just wanted to remind Chen Shi to run quickly. Unfortunately, Chen Shi was not moved at all. Then, Lin Xian saw the young man's action. He secretly crept behind Chen Shi with a knife. At that moment, Lin Xian's eyes were like a dam that had burst. Tears rushed out violently, blurring her vision in an instant. She wanted so much to remind Chen Shi, but she couldn't make any sound. So hateful. So hateful. Tears had already made her unable to see the things around her, but Lin Xian still tried her best to widen her eyes, wanting to signal Chen Shi to be careful behind him. But at that moment, she suddenly saw a trace of pity in Chen Shi's eyes. The eyes were the window to the soul. Through the eyes, one could have a keen insight into other people's minds. Lin Xian's eyes were filled with despair, but Chen Shi's eyes were filled with pity. Suddenly, Chen Shi's right hand moved slightly. Then, Lin Xian's chest tightened, and her vision turned black. She suddenly fainted. Before she fainted, she saw the shining knife in the young man's hand. Little Six was a little excited as he waved the dagger in his hand. As long as he stabbed the knife in, he would get 10 million yuan. Although he might get less than 1 million yuan out of the 10 million yuan, Little Six was already very satisfied. Hu Lao-san had brought them to do many big businesses over the years, but none of them were as easy as today's. Little Six was so excited that the hand holding the knife was trembling slightly. Fortunately, that person didn't notice anything strange about him. Little Six successfully found his way to the person's back. Then he raised the dagger and stabbed upwards. Hu Lao-san had taught them that they should aim for the waist when stabbing, then stab diagonally from the bottom to the top. Because of this, the dagger could pierce through the bones and directly into the organs. They weren't street gangsters but lawless maniacs who ran for their lives. When stabbing someone, they naturally had to stab to death. Little Six was a little excited as he stabbed with the knife. But before he could be happy, a hand suddenly appeared in his line of sight. Then, his neck suddenly felt like it was clamped by a steel clamp. He was like a little chick, being choked by the neck and lifted into the air. Little Six struggled with all his might. Because his neck was being choked, Little Six's face instantly turned red because of the rush of blood. He bulged his eyes and struggled with all his might. Maybe it was because he was used to big waves, but Little Six quickly calmed down. Then he immediately grabbed Chen Shi's arm with his left hand and stabbed at Chen Shi's wrist with the knife in his right hand. Seeing this, Chen Shi immediately lifted Little Six's neck and threw him to the side. Then, Little Six's whole body flew out like a rag doll and hit the load-bearing pillar next to him. Little Six! Hu Lao-san couldn't help but exclaim at the sudden change of events. Bang! 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 Hu Lao-san didn't hesitate to take out a pistol from his waist. He raised his hand and fired 3 shots at Chen Shi. This was a real desperado. In their hands, the gun was a practical tool, not just a toy used to scare people. Hu Lao-san was very confident in his marksmanship. Since he had chosen to make a living in this field, his marksmanship was the only way to ensure his survival. The crisp gunshot suddenly sounded in the empty, unfinished building. Although there was a silencer installed, the sound still made Zhao Yuan's ears ring. Blocking bullets with a car door was a plot that only existed in movies. Only those who had seen a gun knew how terrifying the lethality of a gun was. Thanks to Leader. It's not that I'm ugly, it's that there's something wrong with your eyes. Quiet and promising too. Book friend 2017101145459383 196701005. Curry rice, sushi, and several bosses for their tips. Chapter 39. In the empty, unfinished building, the echoes of the gunshots lingered for a long time. Although Zhao Yuan was also a ruthless person, he was definitely not as cruel, decisive, and merciless as Hu Lao-san. Therefore, even Zhao Yuan was startled when the gunshot rang out all of a sudden. He obviously did not expect that Hu Lao-san, who had been respectful in front of him before, would have such a ruthless side. He really did shoot when he said he would. He didn't even blink his eyes. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. From little six bodies smashing into the pillar to Hu Lao-san shooting, only a few seconds had passed. So after Hu Lao-san shot, Qin Shi still maintained the posture of throwing little six out. However, after 3 shots, Qin Shi still looked like nothing had happened and slowly walked toward Zhao Yuan. Did he miss? Zhao Yuan looked at Qin Shi with some surprise, then turned to look at Hu Lao-san. Hu Lao-san was also a little surprised. Did he miss? With his shooting skills, he could at least get a score of more than 98 points within 20 meters, even if he couldn't hit every shot. Moreover, that was the result of target practice. Now, he was shooting people. Qin Shi was such a big person, but he fired 3 shots in a row and missed. It was indeed a little unreasonable. Hu Lao-san frowned and aimed the muzzle at Qin Shi's chest, then shot again with a bang. This time, he finally saw Qin Shi's movements clearly. It turned out that Qin Shi had dodged to the side a second before he shot, and then recovered at a very fast speed. The initial speed of a pistol bullet was about 300 meters per second, and Qin Shi's current movement was not as fast as the bullet. The reason why Hu Lao-san could not hit him was that Qin Shi had already judged the direction of the bullet the moment Hu Lao-san aimed the muzzle at him and made the corresponding dodging action in advance. Damn, this kid is really weird. With this, Qin Shi finally gave Old Third Hu the most direct understanding of martial arts. After fiercely spitting a mouthful of thick phlegm onto the ground, Hu Lao-san's expression suddenly turned ferocious as he raised his gun and aimed it at Qin Shi. Bang, 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 bang. At the same time, Qin Shi suddenly quickened his pace. His entire body seemed to have turned into a white shadow, and in an instant he was already more than 10 meters away. In the blink of an eye, Qin Shi had already appeared in front of Old Third Hu. Hu Lao-san was shocked. He raised his pistol and wanted to shoot again. But at this time, Qin Shi reached out and grabbed him by the neck, then lifted him up. Just like how he treated Little Six before, he ruthlessly threw him to the supporting pillar at the side. Bang! Hu Lao-san's body heavily smashed against the load-bearing wall, and then slid down along with the wall to the ground, raising a huge cloud of dust. Because the situation changed too quickly, when Zhao Yuan came back to his senses, the one standing next to him was no longer Hu Lao-san, but Qin Shi. Zhao Yuan sat in the wheelchair, slightly raising his head and looking at Qin Shi. Qin Shi's eyes were very calm, without any emotion in them, as if he was looking at a dead person. At this moment, Zhao Yuan felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar, which was exactly the same feeling as that night in Sally's restaurant. Damn, why are you still in a daze? Kill him for me. Shoot. All of you shoot. Zhao Yuan came back to his senses and hurriedly controlled the wheelchair to move back. Instinctively, he wanted to stay away from Qin Shi. After hearing his roar, the remaining 4 big men suddenly woke up and took out their pistols to aim at Qin Shi. At this time, Qin Shi moved again. He suddenly swung his arms to both sides, and 4 coins instantly flew out of his hands. Like accurately guided missiles, they accurately hit the middle of the 4 big men's foreheads. Poochie, after a few soft sounds. The 4 coins respectively went through the 4 big men's skulls, drawing a long blood flower in the air. They still maintained the posture of standing with guns, but the back of their heads was like a broken water pipe, with blood constantly spurting out. A few seconds later, the 4 big men's bodies fell straight to the ground. What happened in front of him was completely beyond Zhao Yuan's understanding. The 6 lawless fanatics that he found with 10 million yuan fell down just like that? How could it be? How could it be? Zhao Yuan's lips trembled slightly, and his face was completely like he had seen a ghost. He couldn't believe his eyes as he glanced at Old Third Hu lying on the ground. Then, he looked at the 4 big men lying motionless on the ground. Finally, when he saw that Qin Shi was still walking towards him, Zhao Yuan collapsed. He operated the wheelchair to move back at the fastest speed, and crazily roared, "Don't come over! Don't come over!" He was not even afraid of guns, and could take people's lives with a light wave of his hand? Was he a human or a monster? Was it really so powerful to practice martial arts? Zhao Yuan sat in the wheelchair and kept moving back. Suddenly his wheelchair got stuck on a piece of concrete. Zhao Yuan didn't react for a moment, and was still crazily pressing the back button of the wheelchair. The wheel was stuck in the crevice and kept spinning, causing him to fall to the ground with his back facing the sky as if he was a spring onion. This fall was not light, but after Zhao Yuan fell to the ground, he got up and wanted to run, regardless of the pain in his body. "Don't kill me, don't kill me." Zhao Yuan struggled to crawl forward, muttering to himself. Obviously, he was scared out of his wits by Chen Shi. Chen Shi looked at his back and didn't chase him, but said softly, "I said that ignorance gave you great courage. Now, do you understand?" After that, Chen Shi no longer looked at Zhao Yuan's ugly appearance, but turned to Lin Xian. Lin Xian was tied to the chair with her head tilted, and Chen Shi gently lifted her head. When he brushed Lin Xian's hair to the side and saw the bruises on her pretty face, Chen Shi couldn't help but feel a little guilty. It was all because of him that Lin Xian was brought this unexpected disaster. After a sigh, a ball of fluorescent flames suddenly emerged from Chen Shi's fingertip. He gently flicked his finger, and the ball of flames suddenly fluttered like a dandelion in the wind, slowly falling on Zhao Yuan's body. Then, Zhao Yuan's shrill scream echoed in the unfinished building. He said that he would let Zhao Yuan understand what it meant to skin him alive and pull out his tendons, and naturally, he wouldn't go back on his words. Although he didn't really want to skin Zhao Yuan alive and pull out his tendons. However, the pain caused by the direct burning of the soul was far less than that of skinning and pulling out his tendons. In the soaring fire, Chen Shi held Lin Xian by the waist and slowly walked out of the abandoned building. "Thank you to several bosses, can beat the shit out of you. Shao Jie Mei Song, Regretful Life, Funing Yang Shua, and Liang for their tips." Chapter 40. This towering fire came and went quickly. When the firefighters received the news and rushed to the scene, there was no spark at the scene. This was clearly arson. Otherwise, how could a dilapidated building full of reinforced concrete suddenly spontaneously ignite? However, after the firefighters took a closer look at the scene, they found that there were no traces of smoke in the building. Just when everyone was a little confused, an old firefighter keenly discovered that the ceiling above their heads was covered with a layer of tiny water droplets. If they didn't look carefully, they really couldn't see it. This also meant that the arsonist didn't use gasoline or firewood to set the fire, but used clean fuels such as natural gas and alcohol. Because only in this way would it not produce black smoke when it burned. Clean fuels weren't cheap. Ordinary people couldn't use clean fuels to create a towering fire of that scale just now. The fire brigade withdrew, and then they informed the Jingkai district branch. The economic development zone was a place where many factories existed. A lot of flammable and explosive chemicals were stored in the factories. Once a fire broke out, the consequences were simply unimaginable. The August 12th explosion in the Shangjin Bin Hanu area was a living example. That accident caused 165 people to be killed, 8 people to be missing, 798 people were injured, 304 buildings, 12,428 commercial vehicles, and 7,533 containers were damaged. The direct economic loss was as high as 6,866 billion yuan. This was a responsibility that no one could bear, so the branch leaders attached great importance to this sudden fire and immediately ordered a strict investigation. The Jingkai district branch immediately convened a mobilization meeting of all the police. They were determined to catch the daring arsonist. However, at the same time as the Jingkai district branch began to act, Chen Shi, the arsonist, had already returned to her residence with Lin Xian. They took a taxi. When Lin Xian woke up, she found that she was already sitting in a taxi. She wanted to ask Chen Shi what happened, but Chen Shi motioned her to look at the taxi driver in the front row. Although there were thousands of questions in her heart, after all, there were outsiders present, so Lin Xian had to forcibly suppress the questions in her heart for the time being. After returning home, Lin Xian couldn't help it anymore. She grabbed Chen Shi's arm excitedly and asked nervously, "Are you okay? I suddenly fainted just now, what happened after that?" When Chen Shi saw how nervous she was, he gently patted her hand and comforted her, "It's okay now." He was the one who had knocked Lin Xian unconscious. Of course, he wouldn't tell Lin Xian the truth. Therefore, Qin Shi lied and said that he had already called the police before he came. The reason why he went upstairs alone was mainly to gather information for the police so that they could arrange a specific rescue plan. However, Zhao Yuan was very alert. He immediately sensed that something was wrong and decisively led his men to retreat. He also took advantage of this opportunity to save Lin Xian. This lie was full of loopholes. If Chen Shi had really called the police, they wouldn't be sitting at home now, but at the police station. However, Lin Xian's mind was a complete mess, so he couldn't tell if Chen Shi was lying. She sat on the sofa and calmed down for a while. Then, she said with some fear, "Will Zhao Yuan come back? What if he comes back?" Seeing this, Chen Shi poured a glass of water for her and comforted her. "Don't worry, kidnapping is a serious crime. Moreover, they secretly hid guns. Now, they are wanted by the police all over the country. They can't even escape, so how could they come back?" "Really? Of course it's true. Don't worry, it's okay now." Chen Shi sat with her for a while. When he saw that she gradually calmed down, he said with a smile, "Call the company first and ask for a leave of absence. Have a good rest and relax for a few days. Since it's all in the past, forget all the unhappiness. Don't take it to heart." Lin Xian lowered her head and didn't say anything. Chen Shi turned her head to look at her, only to find that she was crying silently with her head down. In fact, as long as he put himself in her shoes, he could understand how she felt now. She was suddenly kidnapped and living in the same room as a criminal. She was a woman, and a beautiful one at that. To put it bluntly, she could have been violated at any time. That kind of constant mental stress didn't crush her on the spot, which was really good. Chen Shi didn't know how to comfort her. In short, it was all because of him. He dragged Lin Xian into this and caused Lin Xian to suffer for 2 days for nothing. In the end, this was an undeserved disaster. So after hesitating for a while, Chen Shi could only sigh softly, "It's all my fault, I dragged you into this. I'm sorry." Hearing this, Lin Xian sniffled, raised her head, and forced a smile as if she was comforting Chen Shi. She forced a smile and said, "It's okay, it's all in the past." Chen Shi awkwardly pulled out a tissue and handed it to Lin Xian. He really didn't know what to say in this situation. Lin Xian took the tissue and wiped her nose. Then she took a deep breath, stood up, and said with a smile, "It's okay, it's okay. Wait for me, I'll take a shower and change my clothes and then we'll go out for dinner?" Chen Shi was stunned for a moment, then quickly nodded and responded, "Okay, go quickly, I'll wait for you. It's my turn to treat today." Lin Xian's house was bought with her own savings. The house was not big, only one suite, but the decoration was very warm. She nodded, then turned and walked toward the bedroom. Chen Shi sat on the sofa, thinking about how to comfort Lin Xian. But at this moment, his phone rang. Chen Shi took out his phone and found that it was an unfamiliar number. After thinking about it, Chen Shi picked up the phone. "Hello? Papa, why haven't you come to pick me up? The other children have all left. I'm the only one left." The little girl's childish voice came from the other end of the phone. Her tone was very hurried, and she seemed to be a little unhappy. It seemed that she was angry. "Ouch, I'll go." After hearing the little girl's voice, Chen Shi immediately panicked. It was all Zhao Yuan's fault that he forgot to pick up Nian from school on time. "I'm sorry, Nian. Papa was delayed by something just now. Wait for me at the kindergarten. Papa will pick you up right away. Hurry up. Hurry up. I want to go home." The little girl unceremoniously showed her dissatisfaction on the other end of the phone. "But Papa will come right away, Nian. Wait for me." After hanging up the phone, Chen Shi immediately stood up from the sofa. At this time, Lin Xian also came out of the bedroom, looked at him and asked, "Nian is still in kindergarten?" "Yes, I forgot to pick her up from school." "It's okay, you go pick her up first, we'll talk about dinner another day." "Then I'll go first?" "Go ahead. Remember to call me if there's anything." "Well, don't worry, I'll take a few days off." "Okay, then I'll go first. Bye." "Thank you." Haha, Blue Sea, Mulberry Field. Radishes also have youth. 001248. After playing house. Sleeping dream. Yang Qi. Jun Wu Xie 9. Wanting to say but turning around. Feng Feng Hua Hua. Moonlight fall. Spit 10,000 years. Fubiix. 74,011 pp. Canvas shoes. Cola Hu. So many bosses tips. Chapter 41. After Qin Shi left Lin Xian's house, he took a taxi and went straight to the kindergarten. Along the way, he kept urging the driver to drive faster, but because it was rush hour, no matter how good the driver's driving skills were, the car moved very slowly. Therefore, when Qin Shi finally arrived at the kindergarten in a hurry, it was already 5:30 in the afternoon. The kindergarten was over at 4 o'clock, so when Qin Shi arrived at the entrance of the kindergarten, there were no other parents outside. After briefly explaining the situation to the security guard, Qin Shi quickly ran into the school. Then he found the little girl alone on the playground. The playground of the kindergarten was not big, and it was covered with a colorful suspended assembly floor, surrounded by a few plastic cartoon dolls. The little girl climbed the stairs with difficulty, then sat on the skateboard and slid down. It was still the same slide, but there was no happy smile on her face like yesterday. Seeing this scene, Qin Shi couldn't help but feel distressed. If he had known it would be like this, he would have called Aunt Zhang in advance and asked her to pick her up. Nian, I'm sorry, Dad is late. Qin Shi stepped forward and ran quickly toward the little girl, and at this time, the little girl also saw him. The little girl slid down the slide, sat on the ground, and stared blankly at Qin Shi who was running toward her. But right after that, she began to cry loudly. The little girl cried very sadly. When Qin Shi came over, she immediately opened her small hands and hugged Qin Shi's legs, then cried and sobbed, "Papa, don't leave me." Qin Shi quickly squatted down, hugged the little girl in his arms, and then softly comforted, "Nian, be good, Dad will never leave you. Dad has something to do today, so I didn't come to pick you up on time. I'm sorry, don't be angry with Dad, okay?" The little girl didn't speak, but cried more and more sadly. Qin Shi hurriedly wiped away her tears, but her bean-sized teardrops were like a broken string of pearls. They kept pouring out of her eyes, and no matter how hard she tried to wipe them away, they wouldn't run out. "Nian, don't cry, okay? Dad is here. Dad promises to pick you up on time in the future. Don't cry, okay?" Qin Shi held the little girl's head in his arms, and then constantly comforted her in her ear. After a long time, the little girl's body finally calmed down, and her small body no longer trembled. After she stopped crying, she raised her head from Qin Shi's arms, opened her small hands, and said with an aggrieved expression, "Hug." But seeing that she was no longer crying, Qin Shi immediately excitedly lifted her up, and then prepared to carry her out of the kindergarten. But at this time, the little guy suddenly turned his little head, pointed at the slide next to him, and shouted with a crying voice, "School bag. My bag." Qin Shi looked in the direction of Nian's finger and found a brand new cartoon bag next to the slide. "My bag. Teacher Wang gave it to me." Seeing that Qin Shi hadn't come back to his senses, the little girl immediately flipped out and struggled to break free from Qin Shi's arms, and then went down to get her bag. Qin Shi quickly hugged her, not letting her move, and then quickly said, "Dad will get it for you. Dad will get it for you." When Qin Shi picked up the bag, the little guy snatched it from her. After she held the bag in her arms, she sat quietly on Qin Shi's arm again. Aware of the strong resentment from his daughter, Qin Shi kept teasing her all the way. However, the little girl raised her nose and looked like she was still angry, which made Qin Shi speechless. After the father and daughter returned home, Qin Shi just bent down, and the little girl had already jumped out of his arms, and then ran quickly to the kitchen, and complained loudly to Aunt Zhang, "Grandma, Dad didn't pick me up today." "What's wrong?" Aunt Zhang looked at the little girl with some doubts, and then moved her eyes to Qin Shi. Seeing this, Qin Shi had to helplessly smile and explain to Aunt Zhang, "Something happened to my friend, I went to see her, and was delayed for a while. When I came back, it was already after school, and I just picked her up from kindergarten. This little girl, she actually learned to snitch on him. Hey, I thought it was something. If you have something to do in the future, tell me in advance, and I'll pick her up." Aunt Zhang touched Nian Yan's head, and then motioned her to go out and play with her father. Seeing that Aunt Zhang did not make a decision for her, the little girl pouted and ran to turn on the TV by herself. During this period, no matter how Qin Shi coaxed her, she did not say a word to Qin Shi. This was the first time the little girl was angry with him, and Qin Shi did not know whether to laugh or cry. After dinner, Qin Shi thought that the little girl's anger had subsided, so he asked her to take out today's painting to have a look. However, the little girl was still holding a grudge against Qin Shi for forgetting her in kindergarten. After taking out the drawing paper from her school bag, she hid it, and no matter what, she would not show it to Qin Shi. While Qin Shi was not paying attention, the little girl immediately ran to Aunt Zhang and said with a smile, "Grandma, look at my painting." "Oh, you've learned to draw?" Aunt Zhang took the little girl's painting with a smile. When she saw the pattern on the painting, she could not help but laugh and praised, not bad, you have talent." Qin Shi's curiosity was aroused, and he quickly sat over to take a look, but the little girl stood forward, blocking Qin Shi's view with her body. "I won't show it to Papa." Qin Shi smiled awkwardly. He was being disdained. So, Qin Shi learned from Lin Xian, and pretended to be sad, and said with a bitter face, "Hey, Nian Nian doesn't want Papa anymore." Sure enough, the little girl fell for this trick. After hearing Qin Shi's words, she immediately took the drawing paper from Auntie Zhang's hand and handed it to Qin Shi. She quickly said, "Papa, here you go." "Good girl." Qin Shi took the little girl into his arms, and after kissing her little face, he picked up the drawing paper in her hand and looked at it. Obviously, a kindergarten child's painting could not be delicate. Nian Nian was not a painting genius, so Qin Shi spent a lot of effort to distinguish the meaning of her painting. The bottom of the drawing paper was painted with green watercolor, which should be a grass, and there were a few crooked little people standing on the grass. There was a sun on the little people's heads, and the strange things next to them should be clouds. Several little people were painted by the little girl with a watercolor pen, so Qin Shi pointed to the black little person and asked, "Nian Nian, who is this?" "This is Papa." After that, the little girl took the initiative to point to the little person painted with red watercolor, and then grinned and said, "This is Mama. This is Grandma. This is me. Draw a moon for the lonely night sky. Draw me singing under the moon. Paint a big window in a lonely house. Draw another bed. Draw a girl to accompany me. Draw a lacy quilt. Draw a stove and firewood. We were born together, and we live together." Chapter 42. The next day. Qin Shi had just sent Nian Nian to kindergarten when Lin Xian called. Lin Xian didn't seem to have rested well. Her voice was slightly hoarse, and he could hear her haggard tone through the phone. After picking up the phone, Lin Xian went straight to the point and said, "Fang Lei just called me and said that her wedding will be brought forward to next Saturday. She wants Nian Nian to be her flower girl. What do you think?" "Flower girl?" Qin Shi thought for a moment and asked, "Is it appropriate? Is there anything special about it?" "No, it's fine as long as she's good-looking. Nian Nian is so cute, it's just right for her to be her flower girl. That shouldn't be a problem. I'll talk to Nian Nian later. She should be happy to participate." "Okay, then it's settled. Bring Nian Nian over for a rehearsal on Friday." "Okay, no problem." After hanging up the phone, Qin Shi thought for a moment. He felt that there was something wrong with Lin Xian, but he couldn't pinpoint exactly what was wrong. Since he couldn't figure it out, then he shouldn't think about it. Putting this question to the back of his mind, Qin Shi waited outside the wall for a while. It wasn't until he saw the little girl dance and finish her morning exercises that he slowly strolled back home. His current state was completely that of an unemployed person who did nothing all day. So when the little girl went to kindergarten, Qin Shi didn't know what he should do. Cultivate? Earth was a planet in the age of chaos. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth was almost exhausted. It was already difficult to raise a cultivator at the golden core stage, let alone a cultivator at the soul formation stage like him. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth was the original energy of all things. It was reasonable to say that any planet that raised life should contain a huge amount of spiritual energy of heaven and earth. But earth seemed to be an exception. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth here was even less dense than some small planes refined by cultivators. Chen Shi didn't understand why earth was like this. However, he knew that if he forcibly plundered the world's spiritual energy to restore his cultivation as a soul formation cultivator, he was afraid that in less than 100 years, the entire Earth's environment would change drastically. The ecological balance would be completely out of control, causing all living things on Earth to slowly walk towards extinction. At that time, this planet would become a dead planet. Earth was his home planet, so it was impossible for Qin Shi to do such a crazy thing. Therefore, there was no need to rush the matter of cultivation for the time being. He just needed to let nature take its course and recover a little every day. Qi refinement, foundation establishment, golden core, yuanying soul formation. The path to immortality was long and difficult to traverse. Every time a cultivator crossed a major realm, they would undergo an extraordinary transformation. However, it was extremely difficult to raise one's cultivation level. Many people with mediocre aptitude were even trapped in the refinement stage for their entire lives, wasting away their entire lives. In the end, under the endless torment of time, they resentfully turned into a pile of dirt. Chen Shi used 500 years to cultivate to the soul formation stage and was known as the #1 genius of the Sky Yen sect in 1,000 years. He was as famous as the divine sons and saintesses of all the realms in the universe. His name topped the prodigy role and he was given the title of Divine Lord Dawn. The last person to receive this title was his master. The soul formation stage wasn't the end of the path to immortality. Above the soul formation stage were the insightful void stage, Tao integration stage, tribulation stage, Mahayana stage. So the soul formation stage wasn't powerful? Powerful was relative. After all, the heavenly jade world hadn't experienced a heavenly tribulation for tens of thousands of years. His master once said that he would stop at the soul formation stage in this lifetime. Chen Shi originally thought so too. However, after spending this period of time with the little girl, he vaguely had a mysterious feeling. Perhaps, thinking of this, Chen Shi shook his head violently and immediately threw the sudden thought out of his mind. Then he walked on the street and recited loudly like a lunatic, 30 acres of land, a cow, a wife and children, a heated Kong, porridge, steamed buns, 2 tails of wine. While he was chanting, his phone suddenly rang, interrupting his shameful behavior. Chen Shi took out his phone and saw that it was a call from Ning Qiutong. "Mr. Chen, there's news about the thing you asked me to do last time." "Really?" Hearing this, Chen Shi couldn't help but widen his eyes slightly. He asked somewhat nervously, "Have you found her?" Not yet." Ning Qiutong was shocked by his sudden increase in volume. After a moment of silence, she continued, "I've checked. There are a total of 56 women in the country named Qin Ruoying, but there's only one who meets your requirements." This news was so shocking that Chen Shi couldn't control himself and immediately blurted out, "Where is she?" Ning Qiutong felt that his condition was a bit strange, so she didn't beat around the bush and directly spilled the beans like a bamboo tube. She said quickly, "According to the information I found, the last time Qin Ruoying used her ID was 3 years ago during the Spring Festival. She flew from Zhonghai to Shangjing, and there was no news after that. I've checked the hotel records, travel records, medical records, and even the police report records. I can't find any record of her. It's as if she suddenly disappeared from Huaxia." After saying this, Ning Qiutong closed her mouth tightly. On the other end of the phone, Chen Shi's slightly rapid breathing could be heard. Ning Qiutong held the phone and waited for a while before there was finally some movement on the other end of the phone. "Shangjing." After Chen Shi muttered to himself, he coughed softly and said into the phone with some frustration, "Sorry to trouble you. It's good enough that you can provide me with such a clue." "It's okay, it's no trouble at all. If you need anything, just let me know." "Okay, thank you." After saying this, Chen Shi was about to hang up the phone. At this time, Ning Qiutong hurriedly said, "Mr. Chen, my father's health is almost recovered, so he wants to treat you to a meal. When are you free? Our family is always looking forward to your arrival." How could he be in the mood to eat when he couldn't even find his wife? Chen Shi thought for a while. but finally nodded and said, "I'm free at any time. You can arrange it." Ning Zhonghua and his daughter had helped him a lot. Although there were no results, they had at least put in a lot of effort, so Qin felt that he should still maintain a good relationship with them. After all, Ning Zhonghua had a strong background in Zhonghai. They were well informed. What if one day there was news about Yingying? "Then do you think tomorrow afternoon is okay?" "Okay, I'll take a taxi tomorrow afternoon. You don't have to send someone to pick me up." After hanging up the phone, Qin walked on the street with some depression. This was the era of Edward Snowden. The technology of the internet was so advanced that it was reasonable to say that there was no information that couldn't be found. Chapter 43. In the afternoon. As soon as Qin got home, Auntie Zhang told her that she was leaving. She had planned to leave after the National Day holiday, but this morning, her son suddenly called and said that her daughter was sick and asked her to go home to help take care of the child. Aunt Zhang guessed that this was a lie made up by her son to let her go home early. But after thinking for a long time, Aunt Zhang decided to go back. Because of the promise back then, she had not been home all these years. She even spent the new year here with the little girl. Aunt Zhang also had relatives, so naturally, she would miss home. So after Qin heard this, he did not say anything and immediately went out to buy her a ticket on the earliest flight. Tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock, Zhonghai flew to Chengdu. Including the fuel cost, it cost more than 800 yuan. They could fly there in less than 4 hours. Although they had not spent much time together, to be honest, Qin really did not want Aunt Zhang to leave. But Aunt Zhang had done too much for their family in the past few years. She also had her own family. She could not always alienate her family for the sake of their family. Therefore, no matter how reluctant he was, Qin did not dare to say anything to make her stay. He couldn't return the favor that he owed her anymore. At night, Aunt Zhang asked Nian to sleep with Qin while she took the opportunity to secretly pack her things. She could not let the child know that she was leaving. Things were different now. In the past, it took 2 days to get to Zhonghai by train. Now, the plane arrived in an instant. Rome City wasn't far away, and the round-trip ticket wasn't expensive, but the sudden sense of loss when they were about to part made Qin feel very uncomfortable. That night, Qin did not sleep. After coaxing the little girl to sleep, he rushed out a few protective jade talismans overnight. Although they were called protective jade talismans, they were actually 3 guanyin pendants that he bought after haggling at the jewelry store in the afternoon for 300 yuan. A jade pendant for 100 yuan. Without looking, he knew that this was the most worthless Xiuyan jade. You get what you pay for, so even the guanyin carved on it was a little crooked. After some processing, Qin engraved a miniature defensive formation on the back of the guanyin pendant. Every time the wearer's life was in danger, the formation would be activated, and the effect was enough to withstand the impact of a large truck. The law and order in Huaxia had always been good. Apart from accidents, there shouldn't be anything that could threaten Aunt Zhang's life. After weighing the jade pendant in his hand for a moment, Qin felt relieved and returned to his bed. The pure white moonlight shone into the room through the curtains. The little girl was sleeping soundly. Qin turned sideways and looked at her white and tender little face. He couldn't help but reach out and gently pinch her little face. The little girl seemed to have sensed something. After waving her little hand and patting the air, she turned around and pressed down on the quilt, revealing 2 short lotus-like legs. Qin smiled and tucked her in. Then, he lay back on the bed and closed his eyes to meditate. The next morning, the little girl did not seem to notice that the atmosphere in the house was a little strange. Therefore, after breakfast, she happily said goodbye to her grandmother as usual. Aunt Zhang looked at the lively and cute little girl and suddenly felt a little reluctant to part. So, she reached out her hands and said kindly, "Hey Nian, you're such a good girl. Come, let Grandma hug you." Hearing this, the little girl immediately threw down her little school bag and jumped into Aunt Zhang's arms. "Oh Nian, you've grown up again. Grandma can't carry you anymore." Aunt Zhang tried to carry the little girl and found that the little girl had gained a lot of weight. She estimated that she weighed 20 to 30 kilograms. I can carry you," The little girl giggled and burrowed into Aunt Zhang's arms. Grandma will send you to school today. How about it? Okay. The little girl sat on Aunt Zhang's lap and nodded vigorously. Aunt Zhang stood up with the little girl in her arms. After a few steps, she found that she could not carry Nian Nian anymore. Thus, she gently put the little fellow down and held the little fellow's hand as they walked out. Qin Shi knew that Aunt Zhang could not bear to part with the child, so he did not say anything. After cleaning up the dishes, he silently followed the grandmother and granddaughter out of the house. Along the way, the little boy talked about what he had seen and heard in the kindergarten, and Aunt Zhang listened with a smile. Qin Shi silently followed behind them, but he could not help but feel troubled. When the little girl came back from school in the afternoon and found that Aunt Zhang was not there, she would cry to no end. God, at the thought of the terrible thing that was about to happen, Qin Shi could not help but feel his scalp go numb. There was only one thing in the world that he was afraid of, and that was Nian Nian crying. Qin Shi stood behind Aunt Zhang with a bitter face. When he saw that she sent the little girl to kindergarten, he finally could not help but let out a long sigh. Aunt Zhang turned around and looked at Qin Shi with a smile and asked, "What's wrong? You can't bear to part with an old woman like me?" "Of course I can't bear to part with her. How about this? I'll bring Nian Nian to Chengdu to visit you once every month." Hearing that, Aunt Zhang spat at him and complained, "That won't do. Wastrel. The plane tickets are expensive." Qin Shi smiled and did not reply, but he had already made up his mind. Don't think that he did not see that Aunt Zhang was secretly wiping her tears just now. At the airport, they had to go through security and check in their luggage. Time was a little tight. So, after returning home, Qin Shi took the initiative to help Aunt Zhang pack her luggage. Aunt Zhang had quite a lot of things. She filled 2 large canvas bags before she was finally done. After tidying up, the house instantly felt a lot more spacious and empty, making Qin Shi feel a little unfamiliar. Before leaving, Aunt Zhang took a deep look at the house. Then, she pulled Qin Shi and took a taxi straight to the airport. When they were about to go through security, Qin Shi handed the jade talisman to Aunt Zhang and told her to carry it with her. At the same time, he reminded her to call him when she got off the plane. If she encountered any difficulties, remember to contact him immediately. It was rare for Aunt Zhang to see Qin Shi's long-winded appearance. She did not know whether to laugh or cry. "You're a good child. Ying didn't misjudge you." This was the last sentence Aunt Zhang left before she left. This was the biggest difference between Earth and the heavenly jade world. 7 emotions: joy, anger, worry, longing, sorrow, fear, shock. Only here could Qin Shi deeply understand that he was still a human, and not an immortal cultivator who blindly pursued the heavenly Tao. It was said that in order to successfully pass the heavenly tribulation and become an immortal emperor, the first thing one had to do was to have no distractions, no desires, and no attachments. Was this the so-called heartless Tao, unruffled Tao, and heartless Tao? Qin Shi pondered for a moment. He still felt that. Chapter 44. After sending Auntie Zhang off, Qin Shi took a taxi from the airport and went straight to Jin City Resort. Jin City Resort was not far from the airport. Half an hour later, Qin Shi arrived at the Ning family's villa. Coincidentally, the person who sent Qin Shi in was the same security guard as last time. However, he seemed to have forgotten Qin Shi. This time, it was not the middle-aged woman who opened the door. It was Ning Qiutong who ran out in her high heels. "Mr. Chen, you're here? Please come in." Ning Qingxue was sitting in the courtyard reading a book. She wondered what was wrong with Ning Qiutong today. Why did she run faster than the housekeeper when she heard the doorbell ring? When she saw that the one who entered was Qin Shi, a trace of surprise finally appeared on her face that had never melted in 10,000 years. What was wrong with her sister? She still did not know that Qin Shi was the one who cured Ning Zhongguo's illness. Ning Qiutong was too embarrassed to tell her about the misunderstanding between her and Qin Shi. Therefore, Ning Qingxue still did not know what happened between the two of them. Seeing Qin Shi and Ning Qiutong walking side by side toward the door, Ning Qingxue thought for a moment. Then, she put down her book and followed them into the house. She was indeed curious. She was there when Ning Qiutong chased them out last time. She did not expect that after only a few days, Ning Qiutong's attitude had completely changed. It was not like her sister at all. She walked into the villa with Ning Qiutong leading the way. As soon as they stepped through the door, Ning Zhonghua stood up from the sofa and said with a smile, "Mr. Chen, you're here. Please take a seat." She did not stand on ceremony. He sat down beside Ning Zhonghua and asked, "Are you feeling better?" After this period of recuperation, Ning Zhonghua's complexion was now rosy and full of energy. There was no trace of illness at all. After hearing Shi's concern, Ning Zhonghua immediately laughed heartily and said, "Thanks to Mr. Chen, I'm much better now. I think I'll be fully recovered in a month. Thank you so much for saving my life. You're welcome." After the two of them exchanged a few pleasantries, Ning Zhonghua coughed lightly, and then said the reason he invited Shi over today. "Mr. Chen, there are two main reasons why I invited you over today. One is to set up a banquet to thank you for saving my life, and the other is to ask you a question." "Difficult problem?" "Yes, it's like this. I have a friend who suddenly contracted a strange illness a year ago. He often feels cold all over his body. When I checked his body temperature, it was only around 20 degrees. It was very strange. Moreover, his hands and feet would cramp from time to time, and he could have an unbearable headache at any time. In his words, it was like the Monkey King being chained by the Golden Hoop curse. Cold all over, cramps, headache." "Did you go to the hospital for a checkup?" asked Shi. "Yes, I did. I went to all the hospitals in the country and abroad, but they couldn't find any problems. I also asked Professor Xie, and he speculated that his symptoms were caused by a disorder of the brain nerves. This kind of illness can't be detected with current medical methods. It can only be detected by the patient's own symptoms, so the doctors can't provide him with effective treatment. This situation has been going on for more than a year. He has been recuperating at home for the past year, but the situation is getting worse and worse. The headaches and cramps are becoming more and more frequent. You're an expert, so I want to ask you for advice on his behalf to see if there's any way to treat it." After hearing Ning Zhonghua's words, Shi said uncertainly, "I can only be sure if I see him in person." Shi didn't know much about medicine, but he knew the structure of the human body. Shi knew every part of the human body, every blood vessel, and even every nerve. He only needed to touch a person to know whether they were sick or not. "Then, when will you be free?" asked Ning Zhonghua carefully. "Tomorrow at the same time." "Okay, I'll pick you up then. He's not feeling well, so I'll have to trouble you to make the trip. I've already discussed the cost with him. 2 million, is that okay?" Hearing this, Shi was taken aback. When he saved Ning Zhonghua, he only received 100,000. He didn't expect Ning Zhonghua to increase the price by 20 times. It was really out of his expectations. Shi nodded. Now that his reputation had been established, his value should naturally rise as well. 2 million wasn't expensive. After lunch, Shi took the Ning family's car back to Kangju community. It was 3:30 in the afternoon. In half an hour, the end of the world would come. When he thought about the storm that was about to be set off by the demon queen Yin, Shi couldn't help but tremble. What should I do? Should I lie to her grandmother to do something, or should I tell her the truth? Shi was really in a dilemma. As a father, it didn't seem good to lie to his daughter, but if he didn't lie to her, how could he stop her from crying? Shi stood at the gate of the kindergarten and unknowingly ushered in the last half hour of the end of the world. A melodious bell rang in the air above the kindergarten. Under the guidance of the teacher, the children rushed to the school gate while chattering. "Papa!" The little fellow saw Shi at the other side of the iron gate and immediately raised her small hand and waved vigorously. "Hey, good girl." Shi smiled and thanked Teacher Wang. Then he took the little fellow from her hand and picked her up. "Papa, where's Grandma?" The little fellow seemed to remember that it was her grandmother who sent her here in the morning, so she subconsciously thought that her grandmother would come to pick her up. However, Shi acted as if he didn't hear it. After squeezing out of the crowd, Shi smiled and said to her, "How was it? What did Teacher Wang teach you today?" Hearing this, The little fellow was indeed led astray by Qin Shi and immediately forgot her question. She laughed and said, "Tangram. Teacher taught us to play Tangram. It's so fun." "Tangram, awesome. Go home and play it for Papa, okay?" "Okay. I know how to spell ducks, deer, and rabbits." Along the way, Qin Shi kept changing the topic to distract Nian. The little fellow was amused by him along the way. Her small body sat on his arm and kept twisting and turning. She was still young, so naturally there was no way for her to tell. Papa's smile became more and more forced. Finally, they arrived home. Qin Shi took out the key to open the door. The little fellow immediately motioned for her father to put her down. Qin Shi hesitated, but under the little fellow's constant urging, he bent down and put her down. Then, the little fellow immediately carried her school bag and ran to the kitchen. "Grandma, Grandma, I'm back." The little fellow ran to the kitchen and saw no one. So she immediately ran to the bedroom, hung herself on the doorknob, and struggled to open the door. But after opening the door, the little fellow was stunned. The box where Grandma put the clothes was gone, and the thick stack of clothes next to the dressing table was also gone. The quilt was neatly folded, and the room was as clean as usual. It seemed that something was different from before, but she couldn't tell what was different. "Grandma?" Seeing no one in the room, the little fellow immediately ran to the bathroom. The bathroom was also not there. She ran to Qin Shi, then raised her small head and hugged Qin Shi's leg and asked, "Papa, did Grandma go to buy groceries?" Looking at Nian's big bright eyes, Qin Shi couldn't help but sigh heavily and squat down gently. He held the little fellow in his arms, and then whispered, "Nian, Grandma left and went home." The little fellow didn't seem to understand Qin Shi's meaning, and hurriedly asked, "This is our home. Where did Grandma go?" Qin Shi really couldn't tell a 4-year-old child the relationship between their family and Aunt Zhang, so he could only take the little fellow to the sofa, and then said to her earnestly, "Grandma doesn't live here anymore. In the future, we'll go to see her once a month, okay?" "Doesn't live here anymore?" The little fellow seemed to finally understand Qin Shi's meaning. She stared at Qin Shi in a daze and didn't speak. Qin Shi saw that there was something wrong with her eyes, and his heart suddenly jumped. Oh no. Sure enough, before Qin Shi had time to say the next word, a heart-wrenching cry sounded in the room. Chapter 45. If there were tears, it was called crying. If there were silent tears, it was called crying. If there were no tears, it was called crying. Crying was very common, and crying was often seen in grief. Only crying was not common. If there were no tears, it was called crying. How could she cry when her tears had dried up? Qin Shi misjudged one thing, which was what kind of blow Aunt Zhang's departure would have on the little girl. She sat sideways on Qin Shi's lap, with her little head tightly leaning on Qin Shi's chest. Her tears had already wet his clothes. Because she had cried for too long, her voice was a little hoarse. There was a sense of pain and despair in her crying, which made Qin Shi's heart ache. "Nian, don't cry, okay? Grandma just went home. She has her own family. That's her home." Qin Shi gently lifted the little girl's head and carefully wiped her tears. But Nian couldn't say anything. Her eyes were tightly closed, and her little mouth opened involuntarily. She kept wailing, which was close to a roar from her throat. Although Qin Shi had already mentally prepared himself, it was only at this moment that he truly understood what it meant to be in despair. There was no other way. No matter how he persuaded, the little girl didn't even listen to a word. From the moment she entered the door and found that Grandma had left, she had been crying for a full hour. Oh my God! Once a 4 or 5-year-old child cried, it was absolutely impossible to hit or scold her. If he hit or scolded her at this time, it would simply be a head-on confrontation. It was completely meaningless and stupid. Therefore, as a parent, he could only carefully comfort her. When she thought it through and was tired of crying, she would naturally calm down. Qin Shi understood the principle, but when this really happened, he still felt a little helpless. This should be a situation that every parent would encounter. At this time, the patience of a parent was extremely important. In terms of patience, no one on earth was better than Qin Shi. But the problem was, he couldn't bear it. Seeing the little girl's grief, she couldn't wait to make her faint. But what about after she fainted? She would still cry when she woke up. There was no other way. She could only hold the little girl in his arms and keep saying, "Daddy is still here. Daddy promises that every other month, Daddy will take you to see Grandma, okay?" The little fellow still did not respond. She repeated it over and over again. Finally, under his constant comforting, the little fellow's condition seemed to have stabilized a lot. She waited for a long time before she finally opened her mouth slowly. She sobbed and said in a hoarse voice, "Mama doesn't want me. Papa doesn't want me. Grandma doesn't want me either. Mama doesn't want me. Daddy doesn't want me. Grandma doesn't want me either." At that moment, Shi's tears were like a flood bursting a dike, rushing out. He hugged the little fellow tightly in his arms and said heavily, "Daddy is here, Daddy is here. Daddy won't go. Don't cry. Daddy will never leave you. I swear. Forever." Suddenly, there was a strange gust of wind in the room, and the picture album on the table was blown by the wind. The little fellow's watercolor pen was suddenly blown by the wind and rolled off the table, making tinkling sounds. Shi's heart ached. The little fellow finally stopped crying. Because she was so tired that she fell asleep. She carried her to the bedroom, gently put her on the bed, and then gently covered her with the quilt. After going to the bathroom to get a hot towel to wipe the little fellow's face, she silently sat by the bed. It was almost August 15th, and the moonlight outside the window was getting brighter. He quietly looked up at the moon hanging in the sky, but there was an indescribable feeling in his eyes. "Ying, even if I have to plow the earth, I will find you. Come back, go back to our home." The next morning, when the little fellow woke up, she had already made breakfast for her. However, he just went to the bathroom and was about to get a hot towel to wash the little fellow's face. The little fellow's loud cries came from the bedroom again. Crying when she woke up, this situation was a bit serious. She quickly ran to the living room to find his mobile phone, and then directly called Aunt Zhang. On the other side of the phone, after listening to Shi's story, Aunt Zhang immediately said with some blame, "Why didn't you call me yesterday?" Hearing this, she could only shake his head with a wry smile and explain, "Seeing her cry like that yesterday, I was already out of my wits. It didn't even occur to me that calling you was the best solution. Hey, you child, hurry up and add me on WeChat, open a video call, and I'll talk to her." She was stunned. "Hey, why are you so out of touch with society? You're not as knowledgeable as an old woman like me. Hurry up, go and download one now. The WeChat ID is my phone number." After that, Aunt Zhang hung up the phone. She quickly browsed through the application store. He used to be in the computer industry, so he had a certain understanding of WeChat. However, not long after WeChat was released, he left the Earth, so he did not expect WeChat to develop to its current scale. After she downloaded and installed WeChat as quickly as possible, he immediately applied for a number and used the nickname Nian. The photo was a photo of him and the little fellow. Aunt Zhang's nickname was Zhang San. As soon as she sent out the application, she had already accepted it. Then, Aunt Zhang sent a video call request. "Hurry up, let me see my granddaughter. How can you take care of a child like this? I'm so worried." As soon as the call connected, Aunt Zhang heard the crying from Shi's side, so she quickly asked Shi to pass the phone to the little fellow. She trotted all the way into the bedroom with the phone. The little fellow was still sitting on the bed and crying. She handed the phone over. When Aunt Zhang saw the little fellow's pitiful appearance, she immediately said loudly, "Oh, my good granddaughter. Don't cry, Grandma is here." Hearing that kind and familiar voice, the little fellow opened her eyes in confusion. She sat next to her with the phone. At this time, the little fellow also saw Aunt Zhang on the screen, so she immediately stopped crying and shouted excitedly, "Grandma! Grandma! I miss you so much." "Good girl, Grandma misses you too. Don't cry, Grandma is distressed. Grandma, don't you want me anymore?" As she spoke, the little fellow could not help but feel sad. It seemed that she was about to cry out of grievance again. Seeing this, Aunt Zhang immediately said, "Silly child, what are you talking about? Isn't Grandma here? Your uncle is sick, so I have to come back to take care of him. Otherwise, he won't be able to recover, do you understand? If Grandma doesn't take care of Uncle's illness won't be able to recover. Nian, do you want Uncle to get better soon?" The little fellow hesitated for a moment, nodded and said softly, "Yes. Uncle will get better soon." After Aunt Zhang's patient comforting and explanation, the little fellow slowly untied the knot in her heart. Qin watched from the side. When he saw the little fellow smile again, the big stone in his heart was finally put down. It was too scary. Chapter 46. The video call between the little fellow and Aunt Zhang took a long time, so when the father and daughter finished breakfast and went out, Ning Zhonggua's car was already waiting at the gate of the community. As soon as he got in the car, Ning Zhonggua asked with a smile, "Is this your daughter? She's so cute, just like Qiutong and Qingxue when they were young." Hearing this, Chen reached out and touched the little fellow's head, then said to her, "Nian, call me Grandpa." Before the little fellow had time to call him Grandpa, Ning Zhonggua quickly shook his head and said quickly, No, Mr. Chen, you're my peer. The child can call you uncle." After hearing his words, Chen Shi's first reaction was that Ning Qiutong had become his niece. Fortunately, Ning Qiutong was not here today, or she would probably be unhappy again. However, since Ning Zhonggua had made up his mind, Chen Shi naturally would not disrespect him, so he said to Nian, call Uncle Ning. "Hello, Uncle Ning." The little fellow nodded her little head, and her voice was sweet and crisp, which immediately made Ning Zhonggua laugh. "It's good to have a daughter." Ning Zhonggua reached out and pinched the little fellow's face, but the little fellow seemed to be a little shy. She immediately lay down on the seat and climbed into Qin Shi's arms to hide. Qiutong and Qingxue were as cute as her when they were young, but when they grew up, one was more arrogant than the other, one was more cold than the other, and one was more arrogant than the other, and one was more cold than the other. The only thing they lacked was a sign on their faces that said strangers should not approach them. I'm so worried, huh? Chen Shi smiled and did not answer. Of course, he knew what Ning Zhonggua was worried about. His two daughters were in their 20s, but neither of them liked a man. How could Ning Zhonggua not be worried about not having a grandson? The kindergarten was not far away, and it was only a 2-minute drive. The little fellow got out of the car and took the initiative to stand on the side of the road. She waved to Ning Zhonggua and shouted, "Goodbye, uncle." Good girl." Ning Zhonggua quickly leaned out of the car window and waved to the little fellow. It could be seen that he really liked this cute little fellow. Today, Ning Zhonggua wasn't sitting in the old A6 that he usually rode. Instead, he was sitting in the Maybach S600 that he usually used to pick up and drop off Chen Shi. Although the Maybach was no longer a top-class luxury car, it was now a derivative of the Mercedes-Benz S-Series after production was stopped and adjusted. However, its price was still more than 3 million yuan. It was lower than the Mulsanne and Phantom, but it was still a grade higher than the 7 Series S-Series. This level of luxury car was not very common in the vicinity of Kangju district. Not to mention other things, just the Maybach logo alone was probably something that not many people would recognize. Therefore, when Chen Shi took the little fellow to the kindergarten, several big sisters standing nearby immediately pointed at the father and daughter pair and whispered, "Hey, isn't this Auntie Zhang's daughter, Nian? Could that young man be his father? This car must be expensive, right?" The owners of the resettlement housing community were not necessarily poor, but the tenants of the resettlement housing community were definitely poor. The few big sisters had heard about Auntie Zhang's family. When they had nothing to do, they would chat a little and lament about Auntie Zhang's family's hard life. But now that they saw Chen Shi get out of a luxury car, their eyes immediately became a little different. Regardless of whether the car was his or not, in short, it was already very unusual for this car to be sent here. If he had time in the future, he would have to find Auntie Zhang to chat a little. The voices of the few big sisters were very low, but Chen Shi heard it clearly. Therefore, he smiled and did not take it to heart. Bringing the little fellow to the front of the school gate, Chen Shi turned his cheek to let the little fellow kiss him. Only then did he satisfactorily hand her over to Teacher Wang. As the little fellow walked to the teaching building, she turned her head and said loudly, "Goodbye, Papa. Remember to pick me up." "Don't worry. Papa will pick you up on time." After the little fellow's figure disappeared from sight, Chen Shi turned and returned to the car. "Let's go. I have to come back to pick her up from school before 4 o'clock. A small hermit hides in the wilderness, a great hermit hides in the city. Songjiang National Forest Park was located in the western suburbs of Zhonghai, 30 kilometers away from the city center. In ancient times, it was known as the 9 Peaks of Songjiang. It meandered from the southwest to the northeast for 13 kilometers. The highest altitude was Zhonghai, a coastal port city. It was good to have mountains, so the 9 Peaks of Songjiang naturally became an important outdoor vacation destination for the people of Zhonghai. The Songjiang Villa area was the most famous villa area near the 9 Peaks of Songjiang. Many villas here were rented out for tourists to spend their vacation and earn a sky-high fee. Only the villa in the area was not rented out. There was even an independent entrance and exit that required a card to enter and exit. It was not noon yet. The morning sun was particularly dazzling. The golden light sprinkled a little bit of color in the forest. The trees were lush and the grass was green. Rolling down the window and taking a deep breath, the natural smell from the depths of the forest suddenly made people feel a lot more energetic. Chen Shi silently felt for a moment and found that even the spiritual energy of heaven and earth here was richer than other places. It was indeed beneficial to the body if one stayed for a long time. Ning Zhonghua himself was in the upper circle of Zhonghai, so the guests he introduced were obviously rich and respectable. The car stopped in the garden. Ning Zhonghua took the lead to get out of the car and took the initiative to open the door for Chen Shi. In terms of housing prices, this place might not be as exaggerated as Jin City Resort, but it had an advantage that Jin City Resort could never compare to. A 500 square meter large garden with an outdoor swimming pool. Old Zhang really knows how to choose a place to raise people. Ning Zhonghua took a deep breath. Although it was not the first time he came here, he would always exclaim like this every time he came. Chen Shi did not follow. After getting out of the car, he stood in the same place and kept looking around. It seemed that he was very interested in this manner. Ning Zhonghua waited for him for a moment. When Chen Shi came over, he smiled and introduced him. "Mr. Chen, actually, it's strange. Ever since old Zhang got this disease, he couldn't cure it no matter how hard he tried. But unexpectedly, as long as he lived here, his disease was effectively controlled, and the frequency of his attacks was significantly reduced." Chen Shi did not reply to him after getting out of the car. Ning Zhonghua saw that he did not seem to be listening at all, so he smiled awkwardly. Chen Shi was an expert, so naturally he would not be angry. After thinking for a while, Ning Zhonghua muttered to himself, "Could it be that this place is really good for raising people? Should I move here in the future?" At this moment, Chen Shi suddenly stopped and looked at Ning Zhonghua seriously. "He's not sick." "Not sick? Mr. Chen, what do you mean? I don't understand." The sentence that came out of nowhere made Ning Zhonghua a little confused. Just as he was about to ask for more details, Chen Shi walked directly to the door of the villa. In Ning Zhonghua's eyes, this was a villa with bright sunshine. As far as the eye could see, it was full of flowers, green grass, and blue sky. But in Chen Shi's eyes, this exquisite villa was shrouded in a layer of dark clouds. Chapter 47. The owner of this villa was Zhang Jiada, an old friend of Ning Zhonghua's for many years. They got along well and often helped each other in business, so he was one of Ning Zhonghua's best friends. Both of them were old, so Zhang Jiada retired early like Ning Zhonghua and let his eldest son take charge of the operation of the whole company. Zhang Jiada had 2 sons. His eldest son was responsible for all the affairs of the company and was often so busy that he could not be seen. Although his youngest son's ability was much worse, he was filial. After Zhang Jiada fell ill, he did not go out to play and stayed by Zhang Jiada's side all day. He was a real filial son. Ning Zhonghua and Chen Shi had just arrived at the door of the villa when Zhang Jiada's youngest son, Zhang Hongyuan, came to greet them with a big smile. "Uncle Ning, long time no see. You are still as energetic as ever." Zhang Hongyuan politely stood aside as he spoke and bent over to make an inviting gesture. "Boy, your mouth is much sweeter than before." Ning Zhonghua also watched Zhang Hongyuan grow up, so he was not polite to him. He smiled and patted him on the shoulder, then pointed to Qin Shi and introduced him solemnly. "This is Mr. Qin, my savior and a master of medical skills." Speaking of this, Ning Zhonggua's voice suddenly became much lower and he secretly said to Zhang Hongyuan, "You can't neglect Mr. Qin just because he looks about the same age as you." With Ning Qiutong as an example, Ning Zhonghua was now afraid of ropes after being bitten by a snake for 10 years. Therefore, the first thing he did was to remind Zhang Hongyuan. Ning Zhonghua reminded him so solemnly that Zhang Hongyuan naturally did not dare to take it lightly. He immediately reached out his right hand and said enthusiastically, "I didn't know that a distinguished guest was coming. I hope Mr. Chen won't blame me." "You're welcome." Chen Shi shook hands with Zhang Hongyuan like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water. His attitude made Zhang Hongyuan's eyes slightly surprised, but he was also a thoughtful person, so he did not show the slightest dissatisfaction. Zhang Jiada's style of doing things was somewhat different from Ning Zhonggua's. After entering the villa, Chen Shi saw a few middle-aged women who looked like servants busying around. In addition, there were 2 bodyguards in suits patrolling the second floor. Zhang Jiada was sitting in front of the fireplace in the living room. He seemed to be reading some documents. When he saw Zhang Hongyuan leading Ning Zhonghua and Qin Shi over, he immediately wanted to stand up. However, the moment he stood up, he immediately sat back down on the chair and covered his calf. The expression on his face looked very painful. "Dad!" Zhang Hongyuan immediately ran over and shouted at the servants, "Hurry up! My dad's acting up again. Get some hot water." Seeing this, Ning Zhonghua immediately followed and asked with concern, "Old Zhang, what's the situation?" I'm fine. It's just an old problem." "Ouch, old Ning, quickly sit down. I'll be fine in a while." Zhang Jiada's expression was very painful, but he still raised his head and squeezed out a very reluctant smile toward Ning Zhonghua. Only people who had cramps could understand Zhang Jiada's pain at the moment. Ning Zhonghua immediately cast a look at Qin Shi as if to ask for help, but Qin Shi slowly shook his head. Ning Zhonghua was a little puzzled, but Qin Shi did not give any explanation. Seeing this, he could only sigh and then sit nervously on the sofa next to him. Cramps were technically called muscle spasms. It was a spontaneous tonic contraction of muscles. Muscle spasms in the calf and toes were the most common. There were mainly several reasons for the outbreak. 1. Cold stimulation. Going into the water without warming up was the most likely situation to cause cramps. Or it was when sleeping at night, exposing the legs outside the quilt and being stimulated by the cold. 2. Insufficient rest or too much rest would cause cramps. 3. Incorrect sleeping posture. There were still a few days before the Mid-Autumn Festival. The recent average temperature in Zhonghai was about 26 degrees. No wonder old Zhang lit the fireplace in this weather. Looking at his posture, the cramps were getting more and more frequent. And it was precisely because of the frequency of cramps that less than 30 seconds after Zhang Hongyuan shouted for hot water, a middle-aged woman hurriedly ran out with a 40 to 50 centimeters high basin for washing feet. "Dad, come, put your legs down, you'll be fine after a hot bath." Zhang Hongyuan took the wooden bucket from the middle-aged woman, then squatted on the ground, immediately rolled up Zhang Jiada's trousers, and then carefully put his legs into the bucket. When cramps, even a slight movement would be very painful. In addition, the temperature near the fireplace was too high, so Zhang Jiada immediately sweated. Zhang Hongyuan washed Zhang Jiada's feet with a towel, while Ning Zhonghua and Qin Shi watched silently. In terms of severity, Zhang Jiada's illness may not be as serious as Ning Zhonggua's illness. But his illness was simply a torment, so Ning Zhonghua frowned as he watched from the side. Zhang Hongyuan silently washed his father's feet, constantly wiping his calves with hot water. After more than 10 minutes, Zhang Jiada finally let out a long sigh and lay on the chair weakly. "Old Ning, I've embarrassed myself." Zhang Jiada recovered for a moment, then adjusted the back of the chair and said weakly. His chair was very high-end, like a wheelchair and a recliner. "How is it, do you feel better?" "Better, it's okay, I'm already used to it." After resting for a while, Zhang Jiada controlled the chair and slid it in front of Ning Zhonghua, and said helplessly, "Cramps in my calves are considered good. You haven't seen me when I have a headache, it's just that it makes people want to die. Old Ning, you don't know, because of this illness, I'm now depressed. I'm not even human or ghost, I don't even dare to take a step out of the house, afraid that I'll get sick as soon as I go out." "Old Zhang?" Ning Zhonghua looked at him with a complicated expression. Just as he was about to comfort him and introduce Qinshi to him, a sad look suddenly flashed in Zhang Jiada's eyes, and then he sighed softly and said, "I want to die." Hearing this, Ning Zhonghua's face suddenly changed, and then he shouted angrily, "What nonsense are you talking about? Those who have cancer are not as sad as you are. I've already invited a miracle doctor for you. I don't believe that your illness can stump Mr. Chen." After that, Ning Zhonghua gestured to Qin Shi and said in a deep voice, "Mr. Chen, I'll have to trouble you to check on him." Zhang Jiada knew Ning Zhonghua's character very well, so when he saw Ning Zhonghua looking at the young man with a serious face and an expression of incomparable respect, he couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. Old Ning never joked about important matters. If this young man could make him so respectful, he must have some skills. Thinking of this, Zhang Jiada struggled to sit up and said politely, "Mr. Chen, let me tell you about my situation first." Hearing this, Qin Shi shook his head and said, "No, I already know about your situation." Zhang Jiada was stunned and asked suspiciously, "You know about my illness?" Qin Shi nodded, and then said something that suddenly made Ning Zhonghua and Zhang Jiada's faces change dramatically. Chapter 48. "Mr. Chen, you're joking with us, right?" Because of the previous example, even if Ning Zhonghua felt that Qin Shi must have gone crazy, he didn't immediately refute him. Instead, he wanted to give him a way out. Zhang Jiada's expression changed. He opened his mouth slightly, wanting to say something. However, after thinking about it, he shook his head and sat back in his chair. If it weren't for the fact that old Ning found this young man, he would have kicked him out already. Qin Shi smiled and shook his head. He said with certainty, "I'm not joking." After that, Qin Shi looked around the mansion with interest. According to Ning Zhonghua's understanding of Qin Shi wasn't the kind of person who would speak without thinking. After much consideration, Ning Zhonghua asked cautiously, "Mr. Chen, I believe you. But, can you be more specific with your words? You've seen old Zhang's condition, but you said that he's not sick. We really can't understand this." After hearing this, Qin Shi looked away and asked Ning Zhonghua seriously, "Do you want to know why? Please give me a few pointers." "Okay, but don't blame me for keeping you in suspense. Before that, I have to ask you a few questions." Qin Shi looked at Ning Zhonghua seriously. "Please go ahead. First question, do you think there are ghosts in this world?" After hearing this, Ning Zhonghua's expression suddenly changed. He asked with uncertainty, "Ghosts?" After saying this, he couldn't help but look at Zhang Jiada. Zhang Jiada glared back at Ning Zhonghua unhappily, as if blaming him for finding him a charlatan. However, because of his understanding and trust of old Ning, Zhang Jiada had to suppress his anger for the time being. He wanted to see what the two of them were up to. "Don't hesitate, just tell me your answer." Qin Shi didn't seem to notice Zhang Jiada's expression. Instead, he asked Ning Zhonghua. Ning Zhonghua thought for a while and said hesitantly, "Maybe?" "Okay, let me ask you the second question. What do you think a ghost should look like?" Ning Zhonghua was confused. He really didn't know what was wrong with Qin Shi today. If it weren't for the fact that his life was saved by Qin Shi, even he would have fallen out with him. Seeing that he did not respond, Qin Shi waited for a moment before asking his third question. "Then, what kind of abilities do you think ghosts should have?" Forget it. Mr. Chen was a master. He wouldn't tease him for no reason. Having thought this through, Ning Zhonghua straightened his expression and answered seriously, "The ghosts that I know can confuse people's hearts, transform into thousands of forms, fly in the sky and burrow into the ground, and do everything except for being afraid of sunlight? But it seems that some ghosts are not afraid of sunlight. I heard that they appear during the day? Then where did you learn all this? Some legends pass down by word of mouth, as well as magazines, movies, and TV shows. All right, I'm done with my questions. Chin-shi nodded with satisfaction, then smiled again and said, "Now it's my turn to answer your questions." Please. After the 4 questions were asked, even Zhang Jiada's curiosity was piqued by Chen-shi. He couldn't help but lean forward, ready to hear what Chen-shi would say next. However, Chen-shi's next sentence stunned Ning Zhonghua and Zhang Jiada. "I can tell you clearly that there are no ghosts in this world. To be precise, there are no ghosts in this world like you think. The ghosts that you understand are just an existence that is infinitely exaggerated because of the natural fear of the unknown. Ghosts, to be precise, are ghosts. What is a ghost? Humans have 3 spiritual souls and 7 physical souls. After a person dies, the 7 physical souls disperse first. Then the heaven soul ascends to heaven, the earth soul enters the earth, and the life soul enters the cycle of reincarnation. The heaven soul is yang, the earth soul is yin, and the life soul is yang. Therefore, the earth soul is the ghost. From the perspective of an immortal cultivator, the ghost was in fact a pure and weak body of energy. It couldn't even be called a life. Everything had a spirit, and it wasn't only humans who left behind ghosts after death. If it was a ghost left behind by a living creature, it would retain some memories of its life, but it wouldn't last more than 7 days. It was because the energy of the ghost was pure enough that it was easier for the ghost to come into contact with the origin of all things, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Taking a human as an example, if not long after a person's death, his soul would coincidentally drift to a place with dense heaven and earth spiritual chi, then it was very likely that he would fuse with the heaven and earth spiritual chi and become an even more powerful form of energy in the world. The ghost wasn't scary, because they were just weak mortals, animals, or even plants when they were alive. A little bit of spiritual energy of heaven and earth only provided them with a chance to continue living in the world. When the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was exhausted, it was the time for them to truly disappear. As a body of pure energy, normal people couldn't see the ghost under normal circumstances. However, if the ghost suddenly gathered too much yin energy for some unknown reason, it would cause the ghost's body to materialize. It was because of this that normal people could see the ghost. And this was also the origin of the ghost legends in the world. After Qin-shi's simple explanation, Ning Zhonghua and Zhang Jiada were still a little confused. They really didn't understand what Qin-shi was trying to say. Therefore, Ning Zhonghua asked seriously, "Mr. Chen, whether it's a ghost or a ghost, we're not interested in these mysterious things at all. We just want to know if you can cure old Zhang's illness." His tone was still very polite, but there was a hint of impatience in his words. He was obviously a little impatient. Thinking about it, they weren't immortal cultivators after all. Therefore, no matter how Chen-shi explained, they couldn't understand this level of things. "Forget it. I said he's not sick. Since you don't understand, I'll just show you." After saying that, Chen-shi suddenly raised his hands and quickly made a hand sign, hitting a cup of water next to him. Then, he stretched out his finger and touched the water. He dipped his finger in the water and accurately sprinkled the water droplets on Ning Zhonghua and Zhang Jiada's eyes. Ning Zhonghua's eyes were stimulated. Just as he was about to reach out and wipe the water droplets, Chen-shi's voice came from the side. "Don't wipe it. Before this water droplet dries up, you can see the ghost's true appearance." Out of trust for Chen-shi, Ning Zhonghua stopped what he was doing. After blinking a few times and adapting to the sudden stimulus, he opened his eyes again. However, immediately after that, Ning Zhonghua was so scared that his whole body trembled. Like a frightened cat, he curled up on the sofa and couldn't help but scream at the same time. In the living room that was more than 6 meters tall, there was actually a dense cloud of black fog floating in the air. The black fog kept changing its shape, as if it was hiding thousands of human faces, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws in the air. This was the ghost. Chapter 49. A large expanse of dense black fog suddenly appeared in front of him, and Ning Zhonghua immediately turned pale with fright. Even with his experience and cultivation, he was still frightened to this extent. It was obvious how terrifying the scene in front of him was. Zhang Jiada did not listen to Qin Shi, so he wiped the water droplets from his eyes. However, after wiping them, he saw Ning Zhonghua curled up on the sofa with an expression as if he had seen a ghost. Ning Zhonghua's body seemed to be trembling non-stop. "Mr. Chen, what the hell is this?" The whole room was filled with black fog. It was overwhelming and gave Ning Zhonghua a strong sense of oppression. In a daze, he instinctively wanted to get closer to Qin Shi. Then, a cool feeling suddenly appeared in his head. It was like drinking water, slowly flowing from his head to his chest and then into his limbs. Ning Zhonghua immediately calmed down. Ning Zhonghua quickly turned his head and found that Qin Shi had put his hand on his shoulder and was using his eyes to tell him not to be afraid. "Don't be afraid. These are ghosts." Qin Shi comforted him and then slowly explained, "Ghosts have long lost their minds. They can't even be considered living creatures. Naturally, they won't hurt anyone for no reason." Oh, okay. Ning Zhonghua had some lingering fear. Obviously, the scene in front of him had completely exceeded his worldview. However, because Qin Shi was there, he was no longer so afraid. He tried to suppress his fear and asked seriously, "Mr. Chen, old Zhang's illness, is it because of these things?" Qin Shi nodded. "I understand what you mean." Ning Zhonghua looked at Zhang Jiada with a complicated expression. At this time, Zhang Jiada was almost confused by Ning Zhonghua and Qin Shi's echo. What was old Ning trying to do? Seeing that Zhang Jiada was still in a daze, Ning Zhonghua pleaded on his behalf, "Mr. Chen, please help him open his eyes again." After that, Ning Zhonghua quickly looked at Zhang Jiada and said seriously, "Old Zhang, don't wipe it off again. Trust me, we've been friends for so many years, I won't lie to you." Zhang Jiada and Ning Zhonghua looked at each other. Seeing that he wasn't joking at all, Zhang Jiada nodded and said hesitantly, "Mr. Chen, please, open my eyes." He forced himself to say this, and it was also very awkward. Qin Shi smiled and didn't argue with him. Thus, Qin Shi cast another spell and threw the water droplets onto Zhang Jiada's eyes. 5 seconds later. Ghost. Zhang Jiada's mental fortitude was slightly weaker than Ning Zhonghua's, so when he saw the strange black fog suddenly appear in front of him, he immediately shouted in fear. This time, Qin Shi did not use his true essence to calm Zhang Jiada down. Zhang Hongyuan, who had been standing behind Zhang Jiada, saw this situation and immediately came to Zhang Jiada's side. He nervously grabbed his arm and asked, "Dad, what's wrong?" "It's broad daylight, how can there be ghosts?" After that, he suddenly became angry and pointed at Qin Shi and roared, "What did you do to my dad?" "Hongyuan, don't be rude." Qin Shi didn't react, but Ning Zhonghua immediately stopped him. This scene had also happened in his family before. At this moment, Ning Zhonghua somewhat understood Qin Shi's strange behavior before. After all, their understanding of this world was still too one-sided. Zhang Hongyuan glared at Qin Shi with an almost hostile gaze. After hearing Ning Zhonghua's scolding, he had no choice but to swallow the words that were about to come out of his mouth. Ning Zhonghua was not someone he could offend. "Dad, what's wrong? Are you okay?" Zhang Hongyuan squatted in front of Zhang Jiada. This filial son was still carefully comforting his father as usual. Zhang Jiada's expression changed. When he saw Zhang Hongyuan squatting in front of him, his eyes widened and his face was full of horror. Because he was so scared, he couldn't even speak a complete sentence. "Hongyuan. You, Dad? It's me, what's wrong with you? There's something behind you." Zhang Jiada suddenly roared. His body trembled violently, and he suddenly flipped over from the chair and fell hard to the ground. "Something?" Zhang Hongyuan was a little confused. He turned around and looked behind him, but he didn't see anything. Seeing Zhang Jiada fall, Zhang Hongyuan immediately wanted to help him, but Zhang Jiada scrambled to Ning Zhonghua's side and quickly said with trembling lips, "Old Ning, Mr. Chen, there's really a ghost, quickly save my son." Qin Shi helped Zhang Jiada sit down on the sofa, then stood up and said calmly to Zhang Hongyuan, That's enough. He's your father after all. You owe him a debt of gratitude for raising you. Why do you have to torture him like this? Hearing this, Zhang Hongyuan's expression changed greatly, and he roared, "Bullshit. I don't know what you're talking about. Were you the one who turned my father into this? I want your life." After that, Zhang Hongyuan grabbed a wine bottle next to the fireplace and threw it at Qin Shi's head. However, Qin Shi's movements were much faster than his. Just as Zhang Hongyuan touched the wine bottle, Qin Shi kicked him hard against the wall. However, Qin Shi didn't kick hard, so Zhang Hongyuan immediately struggled to get up from the ground. The sudden scene in front of them shocked Ning Zhonghua and Zhang Jiada. Ning Zhonghua was stunned for a moment, then he asked hesitantly, "Mr. Qin, what's going on?" "You'll have to ask him." Qin Shi spread his hands and replied helplessly. In fact, from a father's point of view, Qin Shi really couldn't understand what kind of mentality Zhang Hongyuan had as a son. At this time, Zhang Hongyuan finally stood up. He stared at Qin Shi with red eyes. Maybe it was because he saw Qin Shi's ability, so he didn't want to pretend anymore. He suddenly covered his chest, took a deep breath, then opened his mouth and let out a sharp whistle. The sound was very sharp. It didn't sound like a human at all, and it was a sound that a man could make. With the sound of the whistle, the black fog hovering over the hall suddenly rolled violently like a thundercloud. Then, the black fog suddenly spread out like ink dripping into water. In an instant, it covered the sky and the sun. Zhang Hongyuan's eyes glowed red. In this dark fog, he was like a monster lurking in the night, ready to pounce on Qin Shi at any time. Suddenly, Zhang Hongyuan stopped screaming, then pointed at Qin Shi. The black fog suddenly stopped surging, just like a frozen image when a picture was taken. But in the next second, the all-encompassing black fog condensed into a cloud of black smoke at an extremely fast speed, and then rushed towards Qin Shi at lightning speed. "So you really know the soul control technique?" Qin Shi suddenly smiled, then shook his head gently and sighed with regret. "It's a pity that my soul is damaged and my consciousness is sealed. Forget it, this time I can only use anti-aircraft guns to kill mosquitoes. I'll let you see. What do you mean by a firefly dares to compete with the moon?" Facing the cloud of black smoke, Qin Shi snorted and suddenly put his palms together in front of his chest. Then he slowly opened his palms. A golden light appeared between his palms. Qin Shi slowly pulled his palms apart, and the golden light grew brighter and brighter as his palms gradually separated. In the end, it was as if he was holding the sun in the palm of his hand. The dazzling light that shone through the gaps of his fingers made people unable to look directly at it. "Destroy!" After an angry roar, the white sun flame released an endless amount of pressure, like a long spear with monstrous killing intent. It shot into the sky and directly pierced the strange cloud of black smoke. The Great Tao 50, Heaven's Evolution 49, Man Escapes 1. 49 Forms of Heaven's Evolution, Spell Section, Everlasting Evil Slaying. Thank you to Quietly Watching Flowers Bloom and Fall. For the 10,000 reward. Looking at the information, it seems to be a soft girl. Chapter 50. Like snow meeting the scorching sun, the black smoke was instantly swallowed up by the golden light under the strong light that could illuminate all the darkness in the world. Then, everything returned to silence. Ning Zhonghua rubbed his sore eyes. When he came back to his senses, he regretted wiping away the water droplets. The hall returned to how it was when he first walked in. Nothing seemed to have changed. Except Zhang Hongyuan. He stood in front of the fireplace with his hand on his chest. He kept coughing up blood, as if he had suffered a serious internal injury. Seeing him in pain, Zhang Jiada couldn't care less about his fear. He immediately shouted, "Hongyuan, you!" Seeing this, Qin Shi looked back at Zhang Jiada and explained with a complicated expression, "I didn't hurt him. I just destroyed the spirits he collected over the years. You're not sick. The reason why you have cramps, headaches, and chills is actually because these spirits invaded your body under his control. And he himself, because of the spirit control spell that he learned from somewhere, he forcibly controlled these spirits in an inappropriate way. He wasted his energy for nothing. I think. Chen Shi did not finish his sentence, but his meaning was obvious. The room quieted down. No one spoke again. Zhang Jiada breathed heavily and hurriedly, as if he was still digesting what he had just seen. Ning Zhonghua also looked at Zhang Jiada and his son in shock. At this moment, a phone suddenly rang at a very inappropriate time. Chen Shi looked down and saw that it was his phone. He wanted to hang up immediately. After all, the atmosphere now was much more serious than the meeting. But when he saw that the caller was Mr. Wang, his eyelids immediately twitched. He quickly walked to the side and picked up the phone. Mr. Chin? Yes, it's me. What's the matter, Mr. Wang? Mr. Chin, we found that Nian Yan's behavior today is a little strange. Hearing this, Chin Shi was stunned. He couldn't help but raise his voice and ask anxiously, "What's wrong with her?" It's like this. Nian Yan was fine in the morning, but after her afternoon nap, she started crying when she woke up. We asked her several times, but she didn't say why. The child's personality is very good, and she is also very outgoing. 2 days ago, she would play with the other children, but this afternoon, she sat alone at the side and played with her toys. Her mouth is muttering something, and I don't know what she is saying. Out of my responsibility and intuition as a teacher, I feel that it is necessary for me to tell you about this matter. I hope that as parents, you can pay attention to this matter. After all, a child wouldn't cry for no reason or even do a series of abnormal actions. After listening to Mr. Wang's words, Chen Shi let out a deep breath. Then he solemnly said to the other end of the phone, "Thank you, Mr. Wang. I think I know what happened to her. I'm coming to pick her up now. Sorry to trouble you. It's fine. This is what I should do." After hanging up the phone, Chen Shi immediately made a decision. Go to Chengdu. It was urgent. Nian Yan had been with Auntie Zhang since she was born. Over the years, Auntie Zhang had painstakingly raised her. The relationship between them must be far more than that of a father who had appeared halfway. Now that Auntie Zhang had left without a word, it must have been a big blow to the child. Although he could temporarily calm her down through video, it was ultimately a way to treat the symptoms and not the root cause. After all, for the little girl, all of this came too suddenly. Mr. Wang also said that a child would not do a series of abnormal actions for no reason. Many children might have experienced a situation like Nian Yan's, and their parents would always use a reason to convince the child, or to convince themselves. The child would eventually get used to it. In fact, they had to get used to it. Habit was a very scary thing. It was precisely because you were so used to this world that you would not be surprised by anything. Chen Shi put away the phone, then turned to look at Ning Zhonghua and said, "Mr. Ning, I have to go first. Can you ask the driver to give me a ride?" Hearing this, Ning Zhonghua nodded, then looked at Zhang Hongyuan, who suddenly knelt on the ground and cried bitterly. He reached out and patted Zhang Jiada's shoulder, then said in a low voice, "Old Zhang, I'll go with Mr. Chen first." "Forget it, I'm leaving. Call me later." After that, Ning Zhonghua did not wait for Zhang Jiada's reply. He turned around and made a gesture to Chen Shi. Ning Zhonghua had seen and heard too much about this kind of feud between rich and powerful families. Although he did not know the specific details, as long as he put things together and thought about it, he could guess most of it. It could only be said that every family had its own difficulties. After getting in the car, the driver drove steadily on the road back. Chen Shi was finally not so anxious. After adjusting his state of mind, Chen Shi half-jokingly said to Ning Zhonghua, "This kind of thing, does it happen often?" Of course, Ning Zhonghua knew what Chen Shi was referring to, so he smiled helplessly and sighed, "Not often, but there are always 1 or 2 cases a year. For example, you know the gambling king He Hongshan, right?" "I know a little. It's okay in the mainland, but the He family is the real deal. 4 houses and 17 heroes. Tsk tisk." Speaking of this, Ning Zhonghua shook his head as if he was sighing with emotion. He sighed and said, "Boring, boring." Chen Shi nodded in agreement. When he returned to the kindergarten, it was just 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Chen Shi could not wait, so he went straight into the kindergarten, ready to pick up the little girl and ask for a few days of leave. He did not consider whether his education method was right at all. Because in Qinxi's mind, he only cared about one problem, and that was whether Nianyan was happy or not. As long as Nianyan was happy, then okay, everything was fine. He was so capricious. When Qinxi came to the class where the little girl was, she was alone in the corner of the class, stacking building blocks. Because she rarely went out to play since she was a child, Nianyan always longed for the outside world. She was never afraid of strangers or new environments. But today, she was silently hiding in the corner alone. She looked like the last time when Qinxi did not pick her up on time. She felt a little guilty, so after quietly saying hello to Teacher Wang, he went directly into the class. The little girl seemed to notice that there was someone behind her, so she turned her little head and just happened to meet Qinxi's eyes. She was stunned for a moment, then suddenly turned around and threw herself into Qinxi's arms. Because her movement was too big, her leg accidentally kicked the building block castle on the ground, and the castle fell to the ground in an instant. The little girl put her little head on Qinxi's waist, and without saying a word, she just hugged Qinxi tightly. Qinxi touched the back of her head and whispered softly in her ear, "Let's go, Dad will take you to Grandma now." Chapter 51. After seeing her father suddenly appear, the little girl was not as excited as Qinxi had imagined. After hearing Qinxi's words, she nodded gently and then sat on Qinxi's arm obediently. She wrapped her little arms around Qinxi's neck and then turned to look at the other children in the classroom. Generally, kindergarten did not allow parents to enter the kindergarten, mainly because they were afraid that the parents would affect the mood of the other children and make them start to miss their parents. However, based on the little girl's current situation, it was obvious that she had some psychological problems, so Teacher Wang immediately said to the other children, "Nianyan will only come back after taking a few days off. Everyone, come and say goodbye to her." "Goodbye. Goodbye, Nianyan. We'll wait for you to come back." The children raised their little hands and waved at the little girl. Seeing this, Nianyan also raised her little hand. She gently waved her hand, and then somewhat embarrassedly lay on Qinxi's shoulder, hiding her little face. Qinxi looked at the group of enthusiastic children and smiled as he responded for Nianyan. "Thank you, everyone. Goodbye." After that, he walked out of the kindergarten with Nianyan. Ning Zhongguo's car was still parked outside. He had also bought the plane tickets for Qinxi. They would fly to Chengdu at 5:40 p.m. and arrive at 9 p.m. The little girl was already 4 years old, so she also needed to buy a child's ticket and a household register to board the plane. Chen Yan's household register was in Qinxi's household register. Qinxi only discovered this when he came back. People without children might not know that it was actually very troublesome to register a child's household register. In order to register a child's household register, one must first have a marriage certificate and then go to the woman's household register to apply for a birth permit. After the child was born, one still needed to apply for the child's birth certificate at the hospital, which was the birth certificate. Finally, one could register the child's household register at the police station where the parents were registered. It was naturally more troublesome to give birth to a child out of wedlock, which was the so-called birth of a child without marriage. If a woman wanted to register her child as an unmarried mother, she would first have to go to the family planning department to pay a fine. Without a marriage certificate, she would not be able to apply for a birth permit. Only after paying the fine could she apply for a certificate of illegitimate birth. At the same time, the woman would also need to provide a paternity test between the child and the father. Specific regulations may vary from place to place. It was precisely because of this that single mothers were sometimes really pitiful. The man was irresponsible and disappeared after getting pregnant, leaving behind an insensible unmarried woman with a big belly. Other than being discriminated against all day long, she was also made difficult by the law. After all, the fine was not cheap, and the man had run away. Where were they supposed to go for a paternity test? Qinxi and Qin Ruing did not have a marriage certificate, and Qinxi didn't know much about this. Therefore, he had never even thought about why Nianyan's household register was in his household register. It was as if everything was so natural. It was as it should have been. Chen Shi took Nian Nian home first to get the household register and ID card, and then a change of clothes. People will always have unrealistic fantasies. Because he was worried that Ying might suddenly come back while they were away, in order to reassure himself, Chen Shi carefully pasted a note on the door. "I'm on a long trip and will be back in 5 days." Although Chen Shi knew that it was almost impossible, he even pasted notes on the table in the living room and the dressing table in the bedroom just in case. Later, he took the little fellow and reluctantly got into Ning Zhongguo's car. The little fellow had never been on a plane, so when she heard that they were going to take a plane, she immediately regained her vitality. As the car was getting closer to the airport, the little fellow became more and more excited. Suddenly, a plane flew over their heads. The little fellow immediately pointed to the plane and shouted excitedly, "Papa! The plane! The plane!" Chen Shi hugged the little fellow and rolled down the window. He pointed to the plane and asked, "We're going to get on later. Do you like it?" "I like it. I want to take a plane. I haven't been on a plane yet." "Okay, Papa will take you on a plane today." The car soon stopped outside the waiting hall. Chen Shi took the little fellow to say goodbye to Ning Zhongguo. Ning Zhongguo said with a smile, "I wish you a good time. Remember to call me when you come back." "I'll come back to welcome you. Don't bother. We'll take a taxi back." "Don't mention it, don't mention it. Mr. Chen, you saved my life and Lao Zhang's life. This is a great favor, so you don't have to be so courteous with me. Remember to call me when you come back." Speaking of this, Ning Zhongguo made a phone call gesture and then continued, "Oh, by the way, I've transferred the money to your card. Remember to check it." "Well, thank you." After saying goodbye to Ning Zhongguo, Chen Shi walked into the airport with the little fellow in his arms. This was the first time in the little fellow's life to come to such a large public area, so she immediately opened her mouth and shouted, "Papa, it's so big here. There are so many people, like a zoo." The little fellow sat on Chen Shi's arm. Her small body twisted left and right, and her little head kept turning around. It seemed that she was very interested in everything around her. The first class of the latest flight had been sold out, so Ning Zhongguo did not buy a first-class ticket for Chen Shi. In addition, it was almost boarding time, so Chen Shi did not choose a good seat by the window when he checked in. This made Chen Shi feel a little regretful. They came a little late, so as soon as they booked the tickets, the broadcast over there rang. Chen Shi quickly took the little fellow to line up at the security check. When they finished the security check, it was already 5:20. He ran all the way with the little fellow in a hurry. At this time, the little fellow saw the KFC next to her and immediately shouted to eat it. Chen Shi looked at the time. There was really no way, so he could only force the little fellow to get on the plane. He chose the seat in the back half, where there was no wing to block the view. So as soon as the little fellow sat in the seat, she immediately forgot about the KFC and stretched out her little head to look outside. Sitting by the window was a middle-aged man in his 30s. When he saw the little fellow's pitiful look, he immediately said to Chen Shi, "I'll change my seat with you. Let the child sit here." What a kind man. Chen Shi was overjoyed when he heard that. He quickly responded politely, "Thank you so much, Nian Nian. Uncle wants to give the seat to you. Quickly say thank you to Uncle." "Thank you, Uncle." The little fellow smiled sweetly, which immediately made the middle-aged man laugh and say, "You're welcome," again and again. After changing the seat, the little fellow immediately stuck herself to the window. He didn't know what she was looking at so excitedly. In the process of the plane heading to the runway, the little fellow was excited, so she shouted. Chen Shi gently patted her head and then made a shoo gesture. Seeing this, the little fellow immediately covered her mouth with her small hands, revealing a pair of big eyes, looking at Chen Shi pitifully. Chen Shi had taught her to keep quiet in public, so the little fellow also understood her mistake. "Good girl, sit down first. The plane is about to take off. Look outside later." After pressing the little fellow to sit in the seat, Chen Shi took back the table and fastened her seat belt. Then he let her learn from him and wait for the plane to take off. With a violent shake, the plane took off. The little fellow didn't seem to be afraid of this feeling. When the plane stabilized, she immediately learned the actions of others, rushed to loosen her seatbelt, and then leaned back to the window. Papa, there are clouds outside. Looking at the sweet smile on the little fellow's face again, Chin-shi couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief in his heart. He reached out and pinched the little fellow's face, then imitated her and put his head in front of the window. So, two smiling faces immediately appeared on the window. Chapter 52. It wasn't just the wine that made me cry last night. It wasn't just your gentleness that made me reluctant to leave. How much longer do we have to walk? Hold my hand. The song, Chengdu, blew up the whole country and made many people recognize Chengdu. For people who wandered outside, everyone had a Chengdu in their hearts. It was not just a city, but also a memory that was treasured in their hearts. Chen-shi had never been to Chengdu, so his impression of it was a little one-sided. He didn't know that in this city's rainy weather, if one were to walk on the limestone road with an umbrella, one could see a cat lying lazily under the eaves and taking a nap at the corner. There were hot pot and snacks everywhere, as well as exquisite small pubs. There were high-end and elegant CBD, as well as passionate live house. Perhaps it was because she had never been on a plane, or because she had never been on a long trip, or because she was about to see her grandmother. In short, the little girl was very excited now. She slept on the plane and had already replenished her energy. This trip was considered a trip, so when Chin-shi passed by KFC, he bought her a fried chicken, which made the little girl smile from ear to ear. Chen-shi called Aunt Zhang at this time. Because it was so sudden, Aunt Zhang finally came back to her senses after a long time. While she blamed Chin-shi for wasting money for no reason, she smiled and asked if they had arrived at the station. She would come to pick them up immediately. Chen-shi asked Aunt Zhang to send the location, then carried the little girl to the parking lot. As soon as they arrived at the parking lot, a warm Trump greeting came over. "Master, where are we going?" "Get in the car, I'll give you a ride." "Are we going? Are we going?" Chen-shi did not know that there was an app called Didi Now, so he obediently got into a taxi and gave the address of Aunt Zhang's house. Aunt Zhang's husband was a native of Chengdu, and their house had always been near the Wuho Temple. 262 Wuho Temple Street, a neighborhood that did not even have a name, was built in 2000, and it had been almost 20 years since then. Although the buildings in the district were very old, the living environment was better than the Kangju district. It was mainly because it was close to the Wuho Temple and was in the center of Chengdu. It was already 9:40 p.m. When the driver drove the father and daughter past the Wuho Temple, the street beside Jinli instantly attracted the little girl's attention. That place was brightly lit, and people were coming and going. It looked particularly lively. Seeing her like this, Chen-shi immediately knew what she was thinking, so he stroked the little girl's head and said softly, "Let's go to Grandma's house first, then Daddy will bring you here to play." The little guy nodded obediently. The taxi quickly turned from Wuho Temple Street to a small road on the side. As soon as they reached the small road, the feeling of an old Chengdu came out. 2 rows of lush trees instantly covered the hustle and bustle of the city. Under the dim street lights, a few leisurely passers-by could be seen. When they arrived at the station, the timer showed 49 renminbi, which was much better than Zhonghai. Chen-shi stood at the entrance of the neighborhood with the little girl in his arms. Then he called Aunt Zhang. In less than 2 minutes, Aunt Zhang's figure appeared. "Hey, you're too much. Just wait for the child to make a fuss. It'll be fine in 2 days. I just left and you rushed over with her. Tell me, what's wrong with you? I'm not saying this, but you're a father. It's really not good for your child to spoil her too much." Before Auntie Zhang came over, the familiar nagging voice had already rung out. Chen-shi smiled awkwardly, but the little girl had already opened her little hands and shouted enthusiastically, "Grandma! Grandma! I miss you so much." "Hey, you good child, you're trying to make me sick to death." Hearing the little girl's shout, Aunt Zhang immediately stopped lecturing. Then, she laughed out loud and wanted to take the little girl from Chen-shi's arms. She hugged the little girl and then gently put her on the ground. Then she held the little girl's hand and said to Chen-shi, "Let's go home first." Aunt Zhang's husband left early, so there were only 4 people in their house now. Her son, Xie Pinglin, her daughter-in-law, Kai Shuqin, and her 1-year-old granddaughter, Xieyao. The house was more than 80 square meters, but the design of the old neighborhood was too poor. Too much space was wasted, so there were only 2 bedrooms and a small study room. After entering the house, Chen Shi finally saw Aunt Zhang's son. Aunt Zhang's son was about 28 or 29 years old. He was a little older than Chen Shi. He wore glasses and looked gentle. Her daughter-in-law looked all right. She seemed to be about the same age as Xie Pinglin, so Chen Shi guessed that they were classmates. Pinglin Shuqin come. Let me introduce you. This is Chen Shi, the son-in-law of my former employer. Xie Pinglin was inarticulate, so as the host, he nodded awkwardly when he saw the guest. He said, "Hello." Seeing that, Chen Shi immediately reached out his hand to Xie Pinglin to express his goodwill. Hello, hello. Xie Pinglin seemed to be very unaccustomed to shaking hands, so his body movements were a little stiff. At that moment, Aunt Zhang looked at Kai Shuqin, who was watching TV on the sofa, and said to her, "Oh yeah, Shuqin, Chen Shi will be staying at our house today. Can you tidy up my room and let the father and daughter stay there? I'll stay in the study room later." Hearing that, Chen Shi immediately said, "Aunt Zhang, there's no need to trouble yourself. It's a trip. I'll bring the child out and get a room later." "How can that be? Don't you need money to get a room?" Aunt Zhang scolded Chen Shi. Chapter 53. Kai Shuqin's reaction was very subtle. Aunt Zhang was stunned. She opened her mouth to say something, but no sound came out for a long time. The little girl was also stunned. She stared blankly as Kai Shuqin took the baby away from her. After Kai Shuqin walked into the room, the little girl burrowed into Aunt Zhang's arms and buried her head deep into Aunt Zhang's body. At this moment, Chen Shi gently patted the back of the little girl's hand and said to Aunt Zhang with a smile, "We came uninvited. Sorry for the trouble." "No trouble at all. I'm happy to see this little guy." "But you said, please don't mind." Of course, Chen Shi knew what Aunt Zhang meant, so he shook his head to show that he didn't mind. "Pinglin, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and get Chen Shi a glass of water." Oh, okay." After hearing Aunt Zhang's words, Xie Pinglin seemed to come back to his senses and hurriedly ran into the kitchen to get some water. At this moment, Aunt Zhang whispered to Chen Shi, "Don't be like my son. He's not manly at all. His ears are especially soft. In our words, it's raking ears." Hearing this, Chen Shi smiled and replied, "I don't think so. It's a good thing for a man to be in front of a woman. I don't know if you've heard of the saying, deep love doesn't last long. A modest gentleman is as gentle as jade." "Sigh, how can an old woman like me know as much as you young people? Anyway, Pinglin is too raking. He's not manly at all. He's always being ordered around by his wife. It's annoying to see him. The relationship between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law is a big problem in the world. Don't take it to heart. Young people should have their own habits. You're an elder, so you should understand." I don't understand." Chen Shi's words made Aunt Zhang shake her head, so Chen Shi wisely chose to shut up. At this moment, Xie Pinglin brought the water over. He politely handed the cup to Chen Shi, then said awkwardly, "I'll go in and help Shuqin tidy up the room. You guys take a seat first." "Sorry for the trouble." It's fine. Xie Pinglin waved his hand as he walked into the bedroom. Then he gently closed the door. Chen Shi and Aunt Zhang chatted casually. At this moment, he suddenly heard the young couple arguing in a low voice in the room. Even though his divine sense was damaged and he was unable to sense his surroundings, he was still able to sense his surroundings. However, Chen Shi's ears were also very sharp, so even if they closed the door and spoke very softly, Chen Shi could clearly hear what they were arguing about. "No matter what, your mother has been working outside for a few years, and it's in Zhonghai, a big international city. You know how high the salary there is. How much money can an old woman like her use? After working for so many years, he should have saved at least 200,000 yuan, right? And the result? Not to mention that you didn't take a single cent when you came back. It hasn't even been 2 days and you're already asking someone to stay at your house. What, do you really think this is a hotel? Little Chin, how can you say that? That's my mother. It's our duty to take care of her. Should? What about the one outside? Is that what you should do? She's here to travel. She won't be staying here for more than a few days. Don't you need money to eat, drink and play? If your mother doesn't ask you to take time off to play with them tomorrow, I, Kai Shuqin, will write my name backwards. Shuqin, how can you be like this? They're just playing for a few days. As the host, we should entertain them. How much can this cost you? How much? You've seen the current housing prices in Chengdu. If we don't save money to buy a house, can we still afford it in the future? As a man, your salary is not as high as mine. Your daughter is 1 year old and your family has lived in this house for decades. Do you have to live here until your daughter gets married before you're satisfied? The more the woman spoke, the louder her voice became. She seemed to be getting more and more agitated. When Qin Shi heard this, he did not want to listen anymore, so he simply used his vital essence to block his ears. The next morning, Xie Pinglin was about to leave for work after breakfast. At this moment, Aunt Zhang called out to him. Pinglin, Qin Shi came all the way here. He hasn't been to Chengdu before. Why don't you not go to work today and take the father and daughter to Jinli, Wuhou Temple, Chuanxi Road, Qingyang Palace, or something? Hearing this, Xie Pinglin's expression immediately turned bitter. When he was hesitating to say something, Kai Shuqin snorted heavily at the side. Mother, our company will deduct our salary if we take leave. Let him deduct it. We'll earn it back in the future. Quick, call your boss and ask for leave. Just say that I'm sick and you have to stay at home to take care of me. Will that do? Mother, Xie Pinglin was in a difficult position, but he did not dare to reject his mother's request directly. He turned back to look at Kai Shuqin, only to find that she was already carrying her bag and preparing to go to work. At this moment, Chen Shi smiled and patted the little girl's head, asking, Ninian, Daddy will take you to Happy Valley later, okay? But the little girl held the spoon and smiled sweetly. Chen Shi then turned to Auntie Zhang and said, I won't trouble Xie bro, I'll take the child to Happy Valley later. Auntie Zhang, you can't just take care of us, you can't just let 2 men take a child to an amusement park, right? Aunt Zhang thought about it and nodded. She said to Xie Pinglin, then you go to work. Come back early in the afternoon and take them to eat hot pot in the evening. This little girl can eat spicy food. As she said that, Aunt Zhang rubbed the little girl's head. Hearing this, Xie Pinglin breathed a sigh of relief. After a few polite words with Qin Shi, he ran out of the house as if he had just escaped death. After breakfast, Qin Shi helped Aunt Zhang clean up and then took the little girl out. Aunt Zhang originally wanted to accompany the father and daughter to Jinli, but when she thought of taking care of her little granddaughter, she had to give up. Out of the community, Qin Shi stood on the street with Nian Nian in his arms. At this moment, the little girl tilted her head and suddenly said, Papa, let's go home. Qin Shi was stunned. Seeing that he didn't speak, the little girl muttered to herself, Auntie and Uncle don't like me. Grandma likes me, so Annie hates Grandma. I don't want Auntie to hate Grandma. Chen Shi stared at the little girl in a daze. At this moment, he seemed to feel that his daughter seemed to have grown up a lot. A 4-year-old child was actually able to carefully detect an adult's expression. What? Chen Shi kissed the little girl's face and said, We won't go. We'll stay here. Today we'll go to the amusement park, tomorrow we'll climb the mountain, and the day after tomorrow we'll soak in the hot spring. Daddy will take you to a 5-star hotel and see the Leshan Buddha, which is taller than the house. Okay? But Chapter 54. Because it was very close, Chen Shi carried the little girl to the temple of the Marquis. But after looking at the entrance for a long time, she was not interested at all, so Chen Shi could only bring her to the brocade next door. In fact, there was nothing in the brocade that could attract a child's attention, so before the little girl was even halfway through, she was already clamoring to go to the amusement park. Regarding this, Chen Shi did not have any objections, so he took her to a taxi and went straight to Happy Valley. Once they entered Happy Valley, when the little girl saw the huge toy castle at the entrance, she immediately became excited. Because she was not even 2 meters tall, she did not even need to buy a ticket. But the price was she could not play most of the rides. She only found out after coming here that most of the rides in Happy Valley required children to be at least 2 meters tall to play. The roller coaster looked exciting and fun, but it was not a ride that children could play. With no other choice, she could only hold her and stand by the side, watching the others play. It was not that there were no children's rides, such as the merry-go-round, small train, sightseeing wheel, crazy bus, and so on were very popular with children. It was just that the little girl wanted to ride the roller coaster, so she had no choice but to coax and trick her to play all the children's rides. Finally, the little girl put down her pouting little mouth. She originally thought that the little girl would not like Happy Valley, but when they came to a place called the Magic Castle, the little girl immediately exploded with curiosity. There were countless dynamic and strange magic rides gathered here. Every arrangement was deliberately to cater to the child's whims. The magic theater stood in the middle, shining with a dreamy light. In the theater, cartoon dolls appeared one after another, opening the curtains of the magic ball. Magicians skillfully cast magic, happy wooden horses galloped and chased each other. On the bubble ball battlefield, colorful balls jumped around. There was also a big Mexican straw hat, wildly dancing with magic, releasing brilliant lights. When had the little girl ever seen such a dreamy magic world? So she was immediately addicted. When she really started playing, time passed very quickly. In the blink of an eye, it was 5 o'clock in the afternoon. She calculated the time and estimated that it would take at least an hour to go back during the rush hour, so he carried the little fellow and prepared to leave. However, she was unwilling no matter what he said. She persuaded her in every way possible and bought her a big panda plushie. Only then did the little girl reluctantly say goodbye to the magic castle with the plushie in her arms. "Papa, when can I come to the amusement park again? This place is much more fun than the zoo." He then said with a smile, "You don't have to be so polite. The child and I are not used to Sichuan cuisine, let alone hot pot. We'll just taste it." Okay. Xie Pinglin nodded a little embarrassedly. She smiled at him politely, but Xie Pinglin immediately looked away. It seemed like he did not dare to look at Shi. Seeing this, she could only let out a long sigh in her heart. Dinner started in such a strange atmosphere. During that time, Kai Shuqin did not say a word. Her face was so dark that it could drip water. Aunt Zhang also seemed to have something on her mind. When she chatted with Shi, she always smiled very reluctantly. Shi saw all of this with her own eyes. After everyone was almost done eating, Shi used the excuse of going to the toilet and secretly wanted to pay the bill. However, his actions were noticed by Aunt Zhang. Aunt Zhang immediately rushed over and pushed Shi to the side. Shi did not dare to push Aunt Zhang. He could only wait by the side obediently and said helplessly, "Aunt Zhang, it's just a meal. Do you have to be so polite with me? Nonsense. Not even a bowl of noodles." Aunt Zhang's attitude was very firm. She could not afford to offend her. She smiled bitterly and shook his head. When they paid the bill and returned to their seats, Aunt Zhang suddenly realized that Kai Shuqin had actually brought the child home without even saying goodbye. "The child is hungry." Shuqin went back to feed the child first. "Let's go too," Xie Pinglin explained with a dry smile. However, Aunt Zhang was so angry that her face turned red. For the sake of face, Aunt Zhang did not immediately flare up, but her face was terrifyingly gloomy. After leaving the hot pot restaurant, Shi once again mentioned that he wanted to go to the hotel. However, Aunt Zhang was in a fit of anger, so she did not say a word and pulled him into the house. The little girl also saw that something was wrong, so she quietly said in Shi's ear, "Grandma is unhappy. Papa has to be obedient." Hearing that, Shi smiled helplessly and then touched the tip of the little girl's nose with the tip of his nose. He decided that he would take the little girl to Leshan to see the Buddha statue tomorrow. He could not stay in Chengdu and cause trouble for Aunt Zhang. In fact, Chen Shi knew very well that Xie Pinglin and his wife were so poor that they could not afford a meal. Obviously, that was not the case. Their family was not poor. Instead, they had a small savings and were ready to buy a house. The reason why Kai Shuqin had such an attitude was mainly because Aunt Zhang had been in Zhonghai for several years and did not take out a penny when she came back. They were all family. Kai Shuqin was Aunt Zhang's daughter-in-law, so there were some things that could not be said directly. However, this did not mean that she would not express her dissatisfaction in other ways. Chapter 55. The next day. Kai Shuqin didn't even eat breakfast before she left the house. Xie Pinglin, Aunt Zhang, Chen Shi, and the little girl sat at the table and ate silently. No one said anything. Even the little guy, who always liked to make a ruckus when eating, was now as well behaved as a kitten. Chen Shi coughed softly, which finally broke the silence. Aunt Zhang, I'm going to take Nian to Leshan to see the Buddha today, so we won't come back tonight. While speaking, Chen Shi also touched the little girl's little head. The little girl immediately nodded like a chick pecking at rice. While chewing, she said in a muffled voice, I want to see the Buddha. Hearing this, Aunt Zhang could only nod and say, then pay attention to safety when you go there. There are many people in the scenic area. Don't let her run around. Well, don't worry. Soon, breakfast was over, and Xie Pinglin was ready to go to work. But at this time, Chen Shi suddenly stopped him. Brother Xie, let's add each other on WeChat. I'm new here and unfamiliar with the place. If I can't find the place, I'll have to ask you. Oh, okay. Xie Pinglin nodded. Then, without suspecting anything, he took out his phone and added Chen Shi. Later, Xie Pinglin went to work, and Chen Shi sat with Aunt Zhang for a while. When it was about 10 o'clock, Chen Shi carried the little guy and said goodbye to Auntie Zhang. They were just going to play for 2 days, not to go back to Zhonghai, so the little girl was not so clingy. Out of the door, Chen Shi bought a travel bag at the store next door and then walked into the bank next door. Then he sent a WeChat message to Xie Pinglin and asked for Xie Pinglin's work location. Although Xie Pinglin was a little confused, he still returned the location to Chen Shi. His work location was also in the first ring, but it was in the north of the city, so Chen Shi took a taxi and arrived at the door of his unit after half an hour of traffic. Xie Pinglin thought that Chen Shi was looking for him for something urgent, so he ran out in a hurry. But when he came out, Chen Shi didn't say anything. Instead, he directly handed the big travel bag to him. Xie Pinglin reached out and waited. He found that the bag was quite heavy. When Chen Shi released his grip, he immediately staggered. This bag was at least 40 to 50 kilograms, and he couldn't hold it with one hand, so he quickly stretched out his other hand and used a lot of strength to barely hold the travel bag in his arms. What's in it? Hearing this, Chen Shi smiled but didn't say anything. Instead, he gestured for him to open it. Xie Pinglin put the bag on the ground and unzipped it. But the moment he pulled it open, his whole body trembled, and then he quickly covered the mouth of the bag. Where did so much money come from? It was bright red and full of cash. Stacks after stacks, 10,000 a stack. The new version of the yuan was 155 millimeters long, 77 millimeters wide and 0.1 millimeters thick. If the banknotes were brand new, then 1 million on the ground would form a cuboid 31 centimeters long, 38.5 centimeters wide, and 10 centimeters tall. This volume was almost half the size of a common desktop computer's CPU. Of course, if there were old banknotes, then the actual volume of 1 million would be bigger. There's 1,800,000 in cash here. It's a gift to you. So, I suggest that you take a leave of absence and deposit the money into your bank account now. Xie Pinglin was stunned. The expression on his face was very exaggerated. He just opened his mouth and stared at Chen Shi blankly. Chen Shi reached out and patted him on the shoulder. Xie Pinglin suddenly felt like he had been electrocuted. His body trembled and he quickly said, "No. I can't take your money." As he spoke, he wanted to zip up and return the travel bag to Chen Shi. Hearing this, Chen Shi smiled, like a devil who was leading people to fall into hell. He whispered, "Don't you want to buy a house? Think about your wife. If your wife knew about this, do you think she would divorce you?" Xie Pinglin was stunned again. After hesitating for a moment, he quickly said, "No. Absolutely not. Although our family is poor, we will never take other people's money for no reason." Speaking of this, Xie Pinglin's movements were much firmer. So, he zipped up, stood up, and looked at Qin Shi bravely. At this time, there was no hesitation in his eyes. Instead, there was a trace of inexplicable anger. Maybe he felt that he was insulted by Qin Shi's money? Qin Shi looked at him a few times. Suddenly, he shook his head and smiled. Then, he patted the little girl's back and asked, "Nian Nian, Uncle doesn't want our money. What should we do?" The little girl had been greeted in advance by Qin Shi before she came, so she immediately said in a childish voice, "This is Grandma's money." "It's not our money. Grandma doesn't want the money. Papa has no choice, so I can only give it to you." It seemed that Xie Pinglin was stunned by the 1.8 million yuan that suddenly fell from the sky. His whole nerve reaction was much slower. Seeing this, Qin Shi could only pat him on the shoulder again and said earnestly, "You are a good son and a good husband. I know some of your family's affairs. Every family has its own difficulties. As long as it's a family matter, there is no absolute right or wrong, because you are always a family, but there is something I hope you can tell your wife. I hope she doesn't have any prejudice against Aunt Zhang. She has been away for a few years, but she didn't bring back a penny, mainly because I was not at home these years. Without Aunt Zhang, Nian Nian would not have been able to live peacefully and happily to this day. Aunt Zhang is a good person. She can even take care of Nian Nian, a child who has no blood relationship with her and has no employment relationship with her, let alone her own daughter-in-law and granddaughter. You are Aunt Zhang's son, and I think Aunt Zhang is half a mother to me. So I want to tell you that the money on the ground is not everything. I owe her too much, and I will slowly pay it back in the future. You know your mother's character. If I give this money to her directly, she will definitely not accept it. She will even help me save it in case I have no one to rely on in the future. The reason why I spent so much effort to convert all this money into cash is not to show off, but because I hope you can take this money home. In the process of her asking you to deposit the money in the bank and transfer it to me, you can persuade her to accept this money with a clear conscience. You are a man, the head of the family. Do you understand what I mean?" As soon as Qin Shi's voice fell, Xie Pinglin suddenly squatted on the ground and cried loudly. On one side was his mother, and on the other side was his wife who gave birth to his child. No matter how poor her conditions were, she always complained all day, but she never left him. If both of them fell into the water at the same time, who should he save? This was a big problem in the world. When faced with this problem, if he easily made the decision to choose one side and give up the other, then he would be truly childish, hopelessly childish. There was nothing that could not be adjusted between family members. Chapter 56. Qin Shi accompanied Xie Pinglin back to the residential area, but they did not enter the house. Xie Pinglin held the travel bag tightly in his arms, turning back to look at Qin Shi every 3 steps. After walking less than 10 meters, he finally couldn't help but put down his bag, and then bowed deeply to Qin Shi. Qin Shi could only smile helplessly and said to the little girl, "Goodbye, Uncle. We're going to see the Buddha." "Goodbye, Uncle." The little girl waved her little hand vigorously. Then, Qin Shi turned around and walked out with her. He did not dare to see Aunt Zhang now. He could not afford to offend her, but he could hide from her. Thinking of this, Qin Shi turned his phone to airplane mode. However, after thinking about it, he turned off the airplane mode and blacklisted Aunt Zhang alone. After this delay, it was already 3 o'clock in the afternoon when Qin Shi and the little girl arrived at Leshan by bus. They did not have to climb the mountain to see the Buddha. Therefore, when the little girl heard that they could see the Buddha by boat, she immediately clamored to take the boat. They had been on the plane, and now they were finally going to take the boat. There were many tourists here. Because the place was relatively small, it was crowded and lively. It would take about 20 minutes to visit the Buddha by boat, and they would stop in front of the Buddha for 5 minutes. The Leshan Buddha was tall. It was 71 meters tall, the largest stone Buddha statue in the world. The Buddha statue was chiseled from the cliff of Luan Peak of Lingyun Mountain. It was a sitting Maitreya Buddha with a cassock hanging under the double collar, hands on knees, and feet on lotus flowers. The Buddha statue was 98 meters tall, with a head height of 10 meters, an eye width of 3 meters, a nose length of 6 meters, a mouth width of 3 meters, ears length of 7 meters, neck height of 3 meters, shoulder width of 28 meters, body width of 3 meters, middle finger length of 3 meters, and feet length of 9 meters. There were 1,021 spiral buns on the head, each the size of a round table. 2 people could stand on each ear, and each foot could accommodate more than 100 people. Speaking of the Buddha, there was a legend that had to be mentioned. Legend has it that in the early years of the Tang dynasty, there was a Lingyun temple on Lingyun Mountain. There was an old monk in the Lingyun temple whose Buddhist name was Hai Tong. At the foot of Lingyun Mountain was the confluence of Min River, Qingyi River, and Dada River. Here, the water was turbulent and the waves were turbulent. They often swallowed the boats and harmed the people. Monk Hai Tong saw that Sanjiang's water was so rampant, he guessed that there must be water monsters causing trouble in the water. In order to quell the flood and prevent the passing ships from being harmed, Monk Hai Tong mobilized the local people to gather manpower and material resources to start building such a large Zhenjiang Buddha. Such a huge Buddha statue naturally couldn't be built in a short period of time. Therefore, when Hai Tong passed away, the Buddha statue only reached the shoulder. Later, after the joint efforts of 3 generations of craftsmen, it took a total of 90 years before the Buddha statue was finally completed. Chen Shi sat on the boat with the little fellow in his arms. He felt that this place where the 3 rivers converged was a bit interesting. Obtaining water was the best, hiding wind was the second best. Using water to prove the dragon, using water as the boundary. The mountains followed the rivers, and the mountains resided in the water boundary. The water flows with the mountain, and the mountain is waterproof. When one enters a game, one must first look at the water before seeing the mountain. There must be a mountain between the 2 waters. When the water meets, the dragon stops. When the water meets, the dragon stops. When the water flies away, the qi disperses. When the water melts, the internal qi gathers. What a great place where the 3 rivers converged. What a great Zhenjiang Buddha. This monk Hai Tong really did have some skills. However, when Chen Shi saw that the plank road next to the Buddha statue was full of tourists, he couldn't help but sigh. In fact, it was true. The Buddha statue had been sitting here for more than 1,000 years. During this period, it had experienced many storms and witnessed many changes of dynasties. Even if there were mysteries in it, they would have been destroyed completely in the long river of history. What a pity! Chen Shi was sighing with emotion about the ruthlessness of time, but the little fellow didn't care so much. The closer the boat was to the Buddha statue, the more excited she became. The Buddha statue in front of them was getting bigger and bigger. The little fellow raised her small head and kept patting Chen Shi's shoulder, indicating that he should look quickly. Papa, look. The little fellow wanted to describe the Buddha statue, but after holding it in for a long time, she still couldn't think of a suitable description. So she could only sit in Chen Shi's arms excitedly and move around, constantly shouting, "The Buddha statue is so big, so big." She had no choice. Her vocabulary was too small, and the Buddha statue obviously couldn't be described as beautiful. So except for big, the little fellow really couldn't think of any words to describe it. As a scenic spot, if they didn't climb the mountain, the Buddha statue would be finished in a while. So when Chen Shi got off the boat with the little fellow, he found that it was still very early. If he lost his child, he couldn't guarantee that he wouldn't do something terrible, It was the wee hours of the morning, and Chin-shi was like a fish back in water, quickly skimming over one roof after another. The night was his best coat, so even if someone happened to look up at the sky and see him, they would only think that they were seeing things. Chin-shi hadn't recovered much of his true essence, so in order to reduce his consumption, he had to give up on flying. Instead, he leaped from roof to roof in the city. Although he wasn't flying, his speed was still extremely fast. In less than 5 minutes, Chin-shi had already arrived at the foot of Mount Ame. At this time, Chin-shi suddenly seemed to have thought of something and hurriedly turned back. I almost forgot. Although those restrictions could prevent outsiders from entering, they couldn't prevent the little fellow from going out. If the little fellow woke up and found that he was gone, crying would be a small matter. If she ran out to find him, then it would be really troublesome. He didn't want it to be like the three of them fighting the white-bone demon, where Sun Wukong drew a circle and the demon couldn't enter, but Tang Sanzang went out himself. Chen-shi would never allow himself to make such a low-level mistake. Back in the room, Chen-shi saw that the little fellow was still lying on the bed, and he couldn't help but feel relieved. Gently kissing the little fellow's face, Chen-shi cast a meditation spell on the little fellow to prevent her from waking up prematurely. After that, Chen-shi patched up the restrictions that prevented the little fellow from going out, and finally rushed to Mount Ame with relief. The environment of Mount Ame was relatively humid, and the humid areas were known for long fogs, so it was easy for heavy fog to appear on Mount Ame in the morning and evening. Therefore, many tourists would pray that there wouldn't be heavy fog on Jinding the next morning, so that they could see the famous sunrise on Jinding. Chen-shi ran along the sightseeing path. Because it was early in the morning, other than 2 or 3 cars of the scenic area staff, he didn't meet anyone else along the way. After running for about half an hour, Chen-shi came to a place called the Elephant Washing Pool. This place belonged to the high mountain area, and the urban area was only 420 meters above sea level, but the altitude here had reached 2070 meters. Here, white clouds were faintly discernible, and ancient trees towered into the sky. Chen-shi stood on a stone path, and next to him was a cliff. Borrowing the silver light of the clear autumn moon, he lowered his head and looked at the cliff that was like an abyss. Then, he suddenly climbed over the fence and jumped down from the cliff. It took half an hour to come up, but it only took a few minutes to go down. At the bottom of the cliff, there was a basin forest, and near the cliff, there were a lot of rubbish thrown by tourists. I have just been published on 6th frequency, and there are still 3rd river and 1 or 2 small recommendations. I will only be published after the first page is strongly recommended. This process will probably last for another month. So, I'll have to trouble you to rest first. It's useless to urge me because Chidian's books are arranged this way. Chapter 58. Mount Ame was the prettiest mountain in the world. As an international 5A tourist attraction with a double heritage of world culture and nature, it received more than 3 million tourists a year. Therefore, Chen-shi really did not expect that he would find a monster at the enlightened realm at the foot of Mount Ame. This monster seemed to have found the way to refine the spiritual qi of heaven and earth, so it chose such a place with the richest spiritual qi to cultivate silently. After all, the mountain man was an immortal. Monsters cultivated immortality, and in the endless heavens, they first cultivated the human path and then became immortal. Human beings were the head of all things, and they were born like a flawless piece of white paper. Naturally, it was easier for them to ascend the heavenly path than other things. However, humans were complicated. Some fell in love and never got out, some killed and harmed others to create karma, some refused to follow their hearts and sink into their nature. Human nature was not divided into good and evil, and water was not divided into things. It was easy to do good, and easier to do evil. If a person cultivated their heart from a young age, they would be pure and unimpeded. Naturally, it would be easier for them to step on the great path than other things. There was no free meal in the world, and how could there be an easy way to become an immortal? The devil path was easy to practice evil, and the ghost path was easy to practice suicide. The righteous path was difficult to practice, and it was difficult to achieve 1,000 tribulations. Chen Shi didn't come here to slay demons and devils, he was just purely curious. Monsters were actually not as evil and cunning as shown in novels and movies. Before they gained intelligence, there was no distinction between good and bad in their behavior. Everything was based on instinct in order to survive. Natural selection, survival of the fittest, this was the law of nature. After gaining intelligence, they would learn to think like humans, but they would be much more innocent than humans. As for the complicated feelings that humans had towards demons, it was actually more due to the antagonism between races. In nature, there was no such thing as cruelty and killing. There were only producers, consumers, and decomposers. The monster in front of him seemed to have gained intelligence for a long time, so Chen Shi did not feel too much of a bloody smell from it. Instead, it had the calm and tranquility of a reclusive master. It was now the era of firearms, and human civilization had developed to become omnipotent. The living environment of monsters was also more dangerous, so Chen Shi was ready to leave after watching for a while. He had come without a sound, so naturally, he had to leave without a sound as well. However, just as Chen Shi turned to leave, the demon suddenly lowered its head and inadvertently saw Chen Shi's back. It was stunned for a moment, and an extremely anthropomorphic expression appeared on its face. Then it suddenly came back to its senses, and its fur suddenly stood up. Like a frightened cat, it immediately made a pouncing posture toward Chen Shi's back. Yes, this was a leopard, and an extremely rare ink leopard. What was an ink leopard? It had the body of a tiger, but was only 1/3 the size of a tiger. It was a medium-sized carnivorous beast, also known as a leopard or leopard. It is the smallest of the 4 large cats in the genus Panthera. The other 3 are lions, tigers, and jaguars. Shoulder height is about 0, body length is about 1, tail length is about 60 centimeters, weight is 60 to 100 kilograms. It had a round head, short ears, strong and powerful limbs, sharp claws, and strong flexibility. The leopard's whole body was bright, and its fur was brown and yellow. It was covered with black spots and rings, forming an ancient coin-like pattern, so it was called a leopard. Unlike the grayish-white snow leopard, the ink leopard was a black-colored individual produced by the mutation of the leopard's fur color. Its whole body was dark black, and there were still copper spots on it. Therefore, this type of individual was often called an ink leopard. The leopard's physical strength was very strong, and its vision and smell were very sensitive. It was alert, and it could swim and climb trees. It became a bold and fierce carnivore with a wide range of food. It was good at jumping and climbing. It usually lived alone and came out at night, early in the morning, or in the evening. It often wandered back and forth in the forest. Its nature was fierce, but it usually did not hurt people. Leopards were different from lions and tigers. Their biggest difference, other than their size, was their roar. The roar of lions and tigers was really roar, but the roar of leopards was meow. There were 2 major types of cats, called mimi cats and roaring cats in foreign countries. Tigers and lions could roar, and were called roaring cats. Cheetahs were classified as mimi cats and could not roar loudly. The reason for this difference was that the structure of the hyoid bone in their throats was different. However, this difference was not enough to separate them into 2 families, so they were all classified as large cats. Of course, unlike the clear sound of a cat, a leopard's roar would have a hint of hoarseness. Leopards and cats were the same. Their eyes had night vision, so even if Chen Shi's figure was covered by the shadows of the forest, this ink leopard was still sharp enough to notice him. As an intelligent wild beast, the ink leopard's intelligence was not inferior to that of a human's. Therefore, it was very clear that if this person was allowed to return alive, then there would definitely be groups of search teams coming to look for it the next day. And it would once again embark on the path of finding a habitat. In the future, In addition to staying by her side to take care of her and protect her, you also have to play with her. You can only be happy when she's happy, understand? Speaking of this, Qin paused, thought for a moment, and then added, don't be as arrogant as a cat. You have to be more enthusiastic and unrestrained like a dog, okay? The big cat did not say a word and was silent for a long time. Qin was a little dissatisfied. After giving it a fierce stare, he threatened, you don't want to? Then I'll go find another dog to play with her. The big cat was frightened. Now that it had tasted the sweetness, of course, it was not willing to leave. Therefore, after thinking about it, it chose to compromise. Self-esteem was not important. Therefore, the big cat stuck out its tongue and licked the little fellow's little face a few times. Suddenly, the little fellow laughed loudly. Because they still had to climb the mountain, one day was obviously not enough, so Qin could only renew the room. After lunch, the father and daughter took the cat and set off in a car. Although they were going to climb the mountain, in fact, the only one who was really climbing the mountain was Qin. The little fellow sat in his arms, and the black cat sat in the little fellow's arms. This strange combination had attracted the attention of countless people along the way. One must know that the weight of a soldier during daily training was generally about 15 kilograms, and it would only reach 20 kilograms during intensive training. Qin was still climbing the mountain. A 4-year-old child and a cat would weigh at least 20 kilograms, which completely met the standard of intensive training. Therefore, after walking for a while, Qin felt that something was wrong. It was too eye-catching. But he could not put the little fellow down and let her walk on her own. Therefore, after thinking for a while, Qin simply quickened his pace. Under the stunned expressions of the crowd of tourists, he quickly walked up the mountain. There were so many people here. As long as he got rid of the tourists below, the tourists above would naturally not know how far he had walked with the child. The little fellow was purely looking for novelty and had no special interest in the scenery, so Qin directly took her to the cable car that went straight to Jinding. Hearing that they were going to take the cable car, the little fellow was very excited at first, but when she really got on, she felt a little scared. The cable car was different from the plane. Not to mention the small space, the carriage kept shaking when it moved. The little fellow sat next to Qin and hesitantly glanced at the woods below the cable car. She was immediately scared and got into Qin's arms, then whispered, Papa, how long do we have to sit? I don't want to sit. Qin did not expect this. Pets couldn't board the plane, and the first thing to do was to get a quarantine certificate. Then, it would be placed in a pet airbox for random transportation. Thinking about it, it was troublesome, so Qin glanced at the big cat, thinking that since it was so smart, it should have a way to sneak through the security check. As long as it could pass the security check, he could put it in his travel bag and bring it on the plane. After leaving the station, Qin took a taxi with the little girl and the big cat to number 262 Courtyard on Wuhou Temple Street. Today was Thursday, so Xie Pinglin and Kai Shuqin were not at home. Aunt Zhang was alone at home to take care of her granddaughter. Grandma, open the door, we're back. Qin used the little girl's body to block himself and then sent her to knock on the door. The door opened quickly. Aunt Zhang glanced at the little girl, then glanced at Qin who was hiding behind her. She couldn't help but snort coldly and said, You've grown up, huh? You don't even answer my phone. After saying that, she turned around and went back into the house. Seeing this, Qin immediately put the little girl down, then patted her back, indicating for her to follow. The little girl understood what Qin meant, so she quickly ran into the house. After Aunt Zhang sat on the sofa, she immediately lay on her lap. Grandma, I missed you so much. Qin hesitated at the door for a moment before entering the house. In the house, Aunt Zhang was sitting on the sofa with the little girl in her arms. The little girl kept saying good things about Qin so that Aunt Zhang would not be angry. Aunt Zhang was talking to the little girl in a pleasant manner, but when she saw Qin come in, she glared at Qin fiercely and then said somewhat angrily, Hurry up and sit down. Okay. Tell me honestly, what's going on with that one? 8 million? Where did you get so much money? Aunt Zhang was the first person to see Qin Shi, so she naturally knew how much he was worth. However, she did not expect that as soon as she left Zhonghai, Qin Shi would follow her with 1.8 million. Was he robbing a bank? Hearing this, Chen Shi immediately adjusted his expression and said very seriously, "It's like this. You know, I used to study computer science, and I've been in this line of work since I graduated. Didn't I have a small gathering with a few classmates some time ago? Then they asked me to invest and develop a new software together. You also know that the internet is the most profitable industry now, so I didn't tell you before because it hasn't been done yet." Chen Shi took advantage of the fact that Aunt Zhang did not understand the internet and went up to fool her. Aunt Zhang listened for a long time and saw that he seemed to be telling the truth, so she somewhat believed his words. After all, everything related to the internet in the past few years was too deeply ingrained in people's hearts. So after thinking for a while, Aunt Zhang said solemnly, 1.8 million is too much. If you really want to give me a salary, then it's 200,000 for 4 years. Plus the 50,000 you gave me before, 25 is about enough. It's not easy for you to make money. Wait for me, I'll give you the card. After that, Aunt Zhang wanted to get up to get the card. Seeing this, Chen Shi immediately motioned for the little girl to come over. When Yen Yen crawled over, he picked up the little girl, then stood up and ran out of the house. As he ran, he said, "If you don't accept this money, then don't blame us for not coming back in the future." After he said that, the little girl immediately echoed, "Yes. I'm not coming back. I'm not coming back either." Aunt Zhang stood in the living room and saw that the two of them were so determined. After hesitating for a while, she could only sigh deeply and say, "You should know that I didn't take care of your child for the sake of money all these years. I know." Chen Shi quickly interrupted Aunt Zhang and said hurriedly, "Since it's not a matter of money, then all the more you should accept it because it's not a salary, it's a filial piety of mine. 1.8 million isn't a lot. To tell you the truth, I earned a total of 5 million this time, and now I have more than 3 million left." Hearing this, Aunt Zhang looked at Qin Shi with a complicated expression. After a while, she sighed deeply and sat back down on the sofa. Parting is always in September. Memories are the sorrow of missing the green weeping willows in late autumn kissing my forehead in that rainy little town. I've never forgotten you, Chengdu Airport. Chen Shi sat in the first-class VIP lounge with the little girl in his arms. Big Cat had run out to observe the terrain. "Papa, why doesn't Grandma want money?" "Because Grandma is a good person." Chapter 61. After getting off the plane, Qin Shi quickly walked out of the station with the little girl in his arms. The big cat was probably feeling a little uncomfortable because it kept struggling in the bag. Thinking about it, it would take at least 3 to 4 hours to fly from Rong City to Zhonghai. It had been locked in the bag the entire time, and even breathing was a little difficult. If Chen Shi hadn't released a trace of Zhenyuan for it to refine, this guy would have already started to rebel because of the suffocation. So when they reached the exit, Chen Shi quickly let it out. As soon as the zipper was pulled open, the big cat eagerly got out of the bag. Then, it jumped to the ground and immediately shook its body like a dog. "Big cat, thank you for your hard work." The little girl held the big cat in her arms, and the big cat looked around curiously. At this time, a familiar voice suddenly sounded. "Mr. Qin, you're back?" Chen Shi looked in the direction of the voice and saw Ning Zhonghua suddenly coming out of the car next to him. He couldn't help but ask with some doubts, "Mr. Ning, what a coincidence." Hearing this, Ning Zhonghua smiled and said, "It's not a coincidence, I'm here to welcome you back." "Welcome me back? How do you know which flight I'm on?" "I have a friend who is an old leader of the airline company. The day you left, I had already said hello to him and asked him to inform me of your return. As soon as you got on the plane, I received the news and set off." Hearing this, Chen Shi had to say helplessly, "Mr. Ning, we are old acquaintances. You don't have to be so polite." No, you are my savior, and now you are old Zhang's savior. If you have any needs, of course I should be at your service. What kind of need is taking a taxi? Chen Shi was a little speechless. But since Ning Zhongguo was here, of course, he couldn't refuse his kindness, so he got into Ning Zhongguo's car at his invitation. In fact, how could Chen Shi not know what Ning Zhongguo was thinking? However, this wasn't a bad thing for Chen Shi, so he naturally wouldn't reject people from thousands of miles away. After getting in the car, Chen Shi asked about Zhang Jia's recent situation. Ning Zhongguo immediately explained, "Thanks to you, old Zhang has recovered. However, maybe he still can't accept this fact in his heart, so he has been locking himself up at home. I went to visit him a few times, but I was refused at the door. Now, I can only pray that he can walk out of the shadow soon." At this point, Ning Zhongguo couldn't help but let out a long sigh. He lamented, "I didn't expect that his illness was actually caused by Zim. I don't know where that brat learned this crooked method. He actually used it on his own father. He's really a villain. It's really scary. How is Zhang Zion now? Old Zhang and him are father and son after all." After these 2 days of being together, it was more and more obedient to Nian Yan's words. After Nian Yan ran downstairs, she directly took the big cat to the children's activity area in the center of the community. This children's activity area was originally just an empty space. At that time, the neighborhood committee hadn't been disbanded yet. Everyone saw that there were more and more children in the community, so they organized all the residents to pool money together. Each family contributed more than 10 yuan to transform this place into a children's activity area. The so-called children's activity area actually only had 1 slide and 3 swings. Later, when the street office heard about this, they spent money to buy a few outdoor fitness equipment for the community, completely turning this empty space into an important leisure activity area in the community. The little girl carried the big cat to the slide. This slide wasn't as exquisite and beautiful as the slide in the kindergarten. Many parts of the slide had even peeled off, but the little girl didn't mind at all. She carried the big cat and climbed up directly. She waited in line until the child in front of her landed safely before sitting at the slide. Then, she carried the big cat and slid down excitedly. One slide was actually only a few seconds, but the little girl liked to play, so she immediately stood up after landing and was ready to line up again to play again. But at this moment, the child behind her didn't seem to notice her, so he rushed down and kicked the little girl's calf directly. The little girl immediately lost her balance after being hit by him, and her whole body fell straight to the ground just like that. Chapter 62. The sudden turn of events caused the little guy to lose his balance. His small body immediately fell straight to the ground. Because she was holding the big cat with both hands, she couldn't use her hands to support herself on the ground. Seeing that she was about to fall to the ground, the little fellow was worried about the big cat in her arms. So she instinctively bent her body slightly, afraid that she would crush the big cat if she fell. Bang! After a muffled sound, the little fellow fell heavily to the ground, face first. But fortunately, the big cat was a monster after all. So at the last critical moment, the big cat suddenly jumped out of the little fellow's arms and used its body to support her face, so that the little fellow wouldn't fall to the ground. The little fellow lay on the ground, her head on the big cat's body. Big cat! After regaining her senses, she immediately sat on the ground and hugged the big cat again, ignoring the pain. In the little fellow's heart, the big cat was younger than her, so she should be the one to take care of the big cat. The little fellow nervously looked at the big cat's condition, and after seeing that it didn't seem to have any problems, she wanted to stand up with the big cat in her arms. But just as she moved her feet, she suddenly felt a piercing pain in her knee. The little fellow looked down and found that the skin on her left knee had been scraped, and blood was still oozing out. It looked very serious. The blood mixed with the dust on her knee, and the bright red stain against her white skin was particularly eye-catching. Seeing that she was injured, the big cat immediately jumped out of her arms and made a pouncing posture towards the little boy behind the little fellow. Meow! The big cat jumped to the ground, its front feet touching the ground, and its back legs slightly bent. All the hair on its body stood on end. It stared at the little boy, slightly grimaced, and made a low and hoarse voice. If it wasn't for Qin Shi's strict order to not change back to its original form, it would have already transformed and pounced on the little boy. Big cat, don't scare people. Seeing this, the little guy immediately reached out and pressed the big cat's back, dragging it back to his side. Then, he hugged the big cat tightly in his arms. The little boy seemed to be frightened by the big cat's appearance. He stood where he was and didn't dare to move. Cats usually don't attack people, but if they really go crazy and bite people, they are much more powerful than dogs. At this time, his parents also saw the situation here, so they quickly ran over to protect the little boy behind them. The little boy's parent was an auntie about the same age as Auntie Zhang. He seemed to be very afraid of the big cat and immediately hid half of his body behind the auntie. The woman looked at the little boy and then at Nianyan. When she saw the injury on Nianyan's knee, she immediately understood what had happened. Thus, the auntie grabbed the little boy's ear and pulled him out from behind her, then shouted at him, "Little brat, why aren't you apologizing to your little sister?" After hearing the auntie's scolding, the little boy seemed to understand his mistake, so he lowered his head and said softly, "I'm sorry, little sister, didn't you eat?" Louder. The little boy was shocked by the auntie's roar. After hesitating for a while, he cried out, "I'm sorry." Hearing this, Nianyan smiled sweetly and said generously, "Grandma, it's okay, don't blame brother." But after she said that, her little face couldn't help but wrinkle. The pain from her knee made her unable to stand steadily. The auntie saw her in pain and immediately squatted in front of her, asking with concern, "Little sister, where is your house? Let me send you home. Don't worry, I'll take revenge for you later by smacking his butt." Nianyan shook her head and hurriedly said, "Grandma, don't hit brother. I'm fine, I can go home by myself. My house is there." The little girl turned around and pointed behind her, then looked at the injury on her knee. She then said seriously to the auntie, "I'm going home. Goodbye, Grandma." After saying that, she turned around and walked back the way she came. She walked very slowly. The injury on her knee made her unable to lift her leg too much, so she could only move out step by step. The auntie saw her pitiful look and was instantly furious. She pulled the little boy's ear and shouted at him, "How dare you bully people? How dare you bully people?" As she said that, the auntie used her hand to slap the little boy's butt. The little boy cried out in pain and shouted, "I didn't do it on purpose." Nianyan carefully moved home. Because it was only a scratch, there wasn't much blood on her knee. But that kind of pain was real. It was so painful that she couldn't walk. The little girl didn't know why she didn't cry. In short, her mind was completely blank right now. There was only one thought left: to go home. She slowly walked through the forest path and then came to the main road of the community. Opposite was her home. The little girl stood on the side of the road, looked around carefully, and then moved over step by step. Suddenly, Chen Shi's figure appeared downstairs. Then, the little girl felt as if she was suddenly flying. The scene in front of her was like a TV series that was fast-forwarded, switching quickly, and her ears were full of whistling sounds. When she came back to her senses, she found that she had returned home. What happened? Chen Shi sat on the sofa, then put the little girl on his lap, and then looked at the big cat expressionlessly. The big cat was frightened. It was a beast and a monster in the wisdom realm, so it was particularly sensitive to aura and danger. Chen Shi suddenly burst out a strong murderous aura, which scared it so much that its hair stood up, and its whole body seemed to be bigger. "Papa, I'm fine, it doesn't hurt." The little girl seemed to feel Chen Shi's strangeness, so she reached out and touched Chen Shi's face. Her fingers were a little cold, much colder than Chen Shi's face. Chen Shi felt the little girl's movement, so he looked down at her, reached out and touched her little face, and then gently put his hand on the little girl's knee. "Tell Papa, who bullied you?" While speaking, Chen Shi's true essence rushed out like a flash flood, and the injury on the little girl's knee suddenly began to recover at a speed visible to the naked eye. However, after hearing Chen Shi's words, the little girl shook her head and whispered, "Brother didn't bully me, he didn't mean to hit me, Papa. Don't hit brother." Was it really an accident? Hearing this, Chen Shi couldn't help but frown, and turned to look at the big cat. Seeing this, the big cat immediately meowed. Fearing that Chen Shi wouldn't understand, it quickly nodded its head. 5 minutes later, when Chen Shi took his hand away, the little girl's knee had completely recovered. Her calf was as smooth as white jade, as if it had never been injured. The little girl scratched her knee doubtfully, but found that it was as if she had never been injured. Except for the itch in her knee, she didn't feel any pain. She was still young, so she didn't know that what happened in front of her could even be called a miracle. But she knew that it was Papa who cured her. So the little girl immediately laughed and kissed Chen Shi on the face. Papa is so amazing. I don't hurt anymore. Asterisk 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 asterisk. Chapter 63. In the wedding rehearsal, the main characters were, of course, the bride and groom. Therefore, as a flower girl, the little fellow could not have too many scenes. She only needed to take a flower basket full of petals, appear before the bride, and sprinkle flowers along the carpet. The reason why she was asked to come to the rehearsal was that he was worried that the child would be too young to walk alone on the carpet under the attention of thousands of people. A wedding was sacred and solemn, so it should be done to the best of its ability. Because of the episode just now, the little fellow did not want to go out to play anymore. Seeing this, Chen Shi took her out directly and took a taxi to the address sent by Lin Xian, ready to let her play at the rehearsal place. Fang Lei's family was very rich, which Chen Shi had always known. But it was not until he took the little fellow to the rehearsal place sent by Lin Xian that Chen Shi suddenly had a more intuitive understanding of Fang Lei's family's financial resources. Because Fang Lei's wedding would be held on a luxurious cruise ship. In recent years, with the development of society, cruise ship tourism had become an important part of the international tourism industry, and the total number of passengers around the world was as many as millions. Therefore, more and more people in Huaxia chose to travel by cruise ship. Cruise ships were no longer a rare thing, but it was rare to see someone like Fang Lei who rented an entire cruise ship just for the sake of holding a wedding. This cruise ship was called Xingmeng, and it was a very luxurious large cruise ship, with a displacement of up to 120,000 tons and a maximum capacity of 3,500 passengers. Xingmeng had only been out of the factory for a short time, so compared with some cruise ships around the dock that had been in service for more than 10 or 20 years, it was particularly eye-catching and even exuded a fascinating sense of science fiction. Papa, this ship is so big, even bigger than the Buddha. Chen Shi stood on the dock with the little fellow in his arms. The little fellow looked up at the giant cruise ship in front of her, and could not help but open her mouth slightly and let out such a sigh. Hearing this, Chen Shi rubbed her little head and said, "The ship is one by one, not one by one, remember?" "Oh, I remember." The little girl nodded blankly, then pointed at the cruise ship and shouted, "Papa, I want to go up and play. I want to take a big ship." "Don't worry, we can only go up when Big Sister comes to pick us up." So, Chen Shi hid in the shadow of the cruise ship with the little girl in his arms. While telling her a story, he quietly waited for Lin Xian to arrive. It was now afternoon, and the salty sea breeze wrapped around the warm sunlight, making everything around them seem so peaceful. On the pier, the sound of crashing waves could be heard again and again. Well, maybe it's really because poverty has limited my imagination, so before I came here, I didn't think that a wedding could be held on a cruise ship. The two chatted as they walked across the deck. At this time, Lin Xian suddenly thought of something and turned to look at Chen Shi and asked, "Hey, by the way, you and Yingying didn't have a wedding, right?" After saying that, before Chen Shi could answer, she covered her mouth and said apologetically, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have mentioned this." "It's okay." Chen Shi smiled and shook his head, indicating that he didn't mind. However, when Lin Xian mentioned it, it reminded him of some memories and he couldn't help but sigh. "Yes, Nian is already 4 years old, but I still owe Yingying a romantic wedding. In fact, 5 years ago, Qin also fantasized about what his wedding with Yingying would be like. Unfortunately, Yingying didn't seem to like this topic, so Qin never had an in-depth conversation with her on this topic. Therefore, he didn't know what Yingying was looking forward to their wedding. Qin looked at the busy wedding staff in front of him and couldn't help but be a little lost in thought. Maybe, compared to a grand and romantic wedding, Yingying actually preferred to spend time with each other in a simple and peaceful way, drinking wine and growing old together. Ning Qiutong looked down on Li Xiuwen because she felt that this person lived too superficially. Although they were all rich second-generation heirs living in the shadow of their fathers, Ning Qiutong could take charge of the entire ocean shipping group on her own. Li Xiuwen, on the other hand, only knew how to deal with the media in his empty company, busy with magazines and newspapers, and promote his name as one of the top 10 youths in Zhonghai. His so-called projects were, in fact, all obtained through connections. Therefore, after Ning Qiutong took charge of the ocean shipping group, she started to reduce the number of outsourced projects, intentionally or unintentionally, in the name of maximizing profits. This move made Li Xiuwen's life a little difficult, so he had already started to plan to wait for his dad to come back to China and bring him along to visit Ning Zhonghua. He did not expect to see Ning Zhonghua here today, so he was caught off guard. Li Xiuwen was still thinking of ways to strike up a conversation with Ning Zhonghua, but at this moment, Lin Xian, wearing a white off-shoulder bridesmaid dress, suddenly appeared. She stood by the railing on the deck, waved at Qin from afar and shouted, "Qin, over here, quickly bring Nian over to change. The wedding is about to begin. Thank you to Katatsumiri for the 10,000 reward. Old man, don't rush me too much, really, indeed, your urging can affect me. If it wasn't for the fact that I really couldn't write, I would have done it long ago. If I were to write the traditional face-slapping chapter of Nian being pushed down, I would write at least 10 chapters, the face-slapping wouldn't stop at all. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.